in 2027.
The answer from European capitals has been as resounding as it is clear. We are in an era of rearmament to respond to the short-term urgency to act and to support Ukraine, but also to address the long-term need to take on more responsibility for our own European security.
On Saturday, we also agreed a new £2.2 billion loan for Ukraine, backed not by the British taxpayer, but by the profits from frozen Russian assets. It is my pleasure to bring from His Majesty the King a letter. He sends his best wishes and his regards, of course, but he also asked me to bear this letter and bring it to you. So can I present the letter from the King to you?
Thank you very much. Am I supposed to read it right now?
Yeah, please do.
I will do.
I've got to tell him what your reaction is, so I need to know. I need to know.
He is a great gentleman. A great, great gentleman. He said he thinks the war's going to go on for a long time, and he better not be right. Well, I just think he should be more appreciative, because this country has stuck with them through thick and thin. We've given them much more than Europe, and Europe should have given more than us, because as you know, that's right there, that's the border.
What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you are not
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning and welcome to Morning Glory. It's 3 minutes past 6 and we are here. It's the home of common sense. It is Tuesday the 17th of June and it's another scorcher of a day out there. I know it won't be the same for everybody up and down the country. I say that always as a kind of rejoinder, just in case people start moaning and groaning. But it is fantastic weather here in London. It was beautiful yesterday. It's going to be lovely today. It's definitely a good day for Peter Blexley to be here because he's wearing his white suit, which is very appropriate for the weather. Peter, very good morning to you.
Good morning,
but I'm afraid the news is rather darker than that because this morning the news is only really one big story, and that is, of course, the grooming gang scandal that is now enveloping not only an awful lot of members of the Labour Party, but this entire Labour government, and indeed the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer. No wonder he decided it'd be a great idea to go over to Canada and hang around with the G7 leaders, because, quite frankly, he doesn't really want to be here. Why? Because on the front pages this morning, there is a litany of shame and absolute and utter scandal surrounding not only what this government said in January, that basically we didn't need a national grooming gangs inquiry because we've already had one, but more than that, it now looks as though the left establishment, and that means people like Sir Keir Starmer all the way through his career, even when he was running the CPS, that's the Crown Prosecution Service he talked so highly of, even when he was doing that, there was a left-wing establishment cover-up. Front page of The Sun today, I think, says it all. Betrayed by the state. Rape victims failed over race fears. And this, of course, is the Baroness Louise Casey report, devastating report, as they call it, which was published yesterday. Basically said the state was in denial over the rape and abuse of white girls. Inside the paper, as you turn the pages into pages 4 and 5, you get an entire breakdown of precisely what they got wrong and precisely what they should have done. The key findings are the police avoided pursuing grooming gangs for fear of being viewed as racist. The establishment has been in denial over the scale of the problem. Reliable data on the ethnicity of offenders not kept in 2/3 of cases. Clear evidence of overrepresentation among suspects of Asian and Pakistani heritage. And public bodies used flawed data to dismiss fears over the ethnic background of gangs. I mean, if that doesn't tell you what is wrong with this country and the people that have been running it for the last 20 years, I don't know what does. Conspiracy of silence over a race doomed thousands of girls to abuse is what it says on the front of the Daily Mail. And the Daily Telegraph, something that I've been saying for a very long time here at Talk and on this show as well, asylum seekers are now behind a new case of grooming gang outbreaks, which is Baroness Casey's report reveals large proportion of open investigations involve people who have come to this country seeking asylum, many of them illegally on small boats. I don't know what to say about all of that, but we'll have plenty of things to say, and I'm sure Peter Bleksley will as well. We'll be crossing over to Canada to find out what's going on there as well, because, of course, President Trump has already left the G7. He refused to sign up to some mealy-mouthed ceasefire deal that they wanted to pressure Israel to go for in Iran. But, of course, that President Trump says no, he doesn't back that, and instead he's gone back to the White House to sort the Middle East out. We've got loads of other stories to bring you. We'll get onto all of them. It's 6 minutes past 6. This is Morning Glory. Let us get it on. Welcome, and to all of you on a Tuesday morning. Peter Bleksley's here. It's a pretty grim report, this, Peter, but it's pretty much confirming everything that you and I have been saying for quite some time over the past several years, right?
For a long, long time.
Yeah.
And if you are not outraged by this story,
yeah,
then quite frankly, you are not British.
Yeah, there's something wrong with you.
So get a passport,
yeah,
go to an airport or a port and get as far away from this nation as you possibly can.
Yeah.
Because this is a scandal of a monumental scale.
Yeah.
It is appalling. It is a stain that I suspect will never be expunged from this nation. No matter how many more investigations we have, no matter how many people get locked up, no matter what the conclusions of this judge-led statutory inquiry that we're going to have, the stain will never go away. And I'll tell you why it won't go away. Because of the victims.
Yes.
The children.
Yes.
The children. The children that were demonised not only by local authorities, social workers, police officers, but also, and it has to be said, certain elements of the media who gave them titles that I'm not even going to repeat here, but they called these children all manner of names when what in fact they were vulnerable children repeatedly being failed.
And quite frankly, often being trafficked as well, because, you know, people were talking many times, whenever we would talk, particularly Labour Party politicians would say, you know, these are isolated incidents, these are things that went on, you know, in certain towns, you know, you can't draw any kind of conclusion about them all being, you know, part of one mass movement. But in fact, many of the victims have said that they were taken from one town to another town to another town. There was one on TV the other day saying that it started in Telford, then she was in Oldham, then she was in you know, Blackburn, then she was in Edinburgh, then she was in Leeds, and then Rotherham. You know, they were passed around the country like sort of cattle.
Trafficked.
Yeah, trafficked.
Trafficked and used for the most
So there's a conspiracy here, isn't there? It's not just a conspiracy of silence. Huge. It's a criminal conspiracy.
Huge, absolutely.
Right.
And Baroness Casey alludes to it yesterday as well.
Yeah.
And she talks about links possibly also to drug dealing, so like county lines.
Yeah.
So these girls were trafficked.
Yeah.
Just used, objectified and abused on an unparalleled scale for the perverted sexual gratification of men who clearly couldn't get it properly elsewhere.
Yeah.
And it is this scandal is going to run and run and run. We need to support the National Crime Agency, who are going to be leading on this. They've got some experience now because they've had their Operation Stovewood running for a while, which has secured some convictions in Rotherham. And in fact, 3 men went on trial yesterday.
They're still going on, aren't they?
There's
trials coming up all the time.
Yeah, but because it is not merely historical offending we're talking about here.
Right.
Whilst, of course, some of the victims have been denied and let down for decades, there are victims that were trafficked and raped probably last night.
Yes, exactly right. There's one of the rape gang victims, and you'll know the name, Sammy Woodhouse. She's actually calling the Daily Express today for Keir Starmer to resign.
Yeah.
Because there's more and more evidence coming forward that when he was head of the Crown Prosecution Service, yes, there were some prosecutions, but there were an awful lot of cases which were not brought to justice on the recommendation of the Crown Prosecution Service, which he was heading.
He was a fundamental part of an establishment that did not collect the data on those few offenders that were prosecuted and on those offenders about whom allegations were made. And why was that data not collected? Because they wanted to cover up the truth.
Right.
They didn't want to expose the level of offending by Pakistani origin men because they didn't want to upset that bloc Muslim vote upon which so many MPs, be they Labour and some of the independents, are now sitting in the House of Commons. You know the ones who want an airport in Pakistan.
That's exactly
who
right.
think it's more important to stand up in our House of Commons and talk about that kind of nonsense rather than what Baroness Casey exposed yesterday.
Exactly right. And so let's look at the dates here. 2008 to 2013, that's when Keir Starmer was Director of Public Prosecutions, head of the Crown Prosecution Service. In 2009, a year after he got in, the CPS was criticised for not prosecuting Rochdale grooming gang suspects in 2008 and 2009, and their reasoning was the main victim was unreliable, in their words. So they dropped the case, right? In 2010 and 2011, child sexual abuse prosecutions reached 4,794, which was the highest during Sir Keir's time as DPP. But after he left in 2016-17, nearly twice as many prosecutions, 7,200.
And I hope victims now will forgive me, because I've had a very quick change of thought here. So I'm going to use some of the terms that were attached to these child rape victims. There you've mentioned one word, unreliable. Do you remember when they were called child prostitutes?
Yes, I do.
Around these matters.
And there was lifestyle choices being made, weren't there?
Yes,
You know.
They didn't have choices, these kids. They were being trafficked and
being
repeatedly
drugged, most
raped.
of them, and drugged.
Yes.
And forced to drink alcohol and all sorts of things. In 2013, a Home Affairs Committee report said, unlike other agencies, the CPS had readily admitted victims had been let down by them and have attempted both to discover the cause of this systemic failure and to improve the way things are done so as to avoid a repetition of such events.
And the head of that organisation is now one of the most deeply shamed Prime Ministers we've ever had the misfortune to live in 10 Downing Street.
He's now the most unpopular Prime Minister of all time. Officially, again, something I've been saying for ages, he's even now more unpopular than Gordon Brown. Right. And after this, I think he's going to be... I wouldn't be surprised if this finishes him off, to be honest, because, quite frankly, you know, the state of his... You know, denial back in January. We played a lot of the clips yesterday. We're going to play them again today. His denial in January, calling anybody who wanted to jump on a far-right bandwagon because they wanted a national inquiry into this, right? He didn't want to do it. He didn't want to go anywhere near it. He appointed Baroness Casey to have a look into it, and he expected her to come back and say, it's not worth having a national inquiry. And guess what? She didn't do that. She decided it was time. And so now he's making out like he's had some Damascene conversion because, you know, now somebody legally has told him that it's what he should do. It's unbelievable, isn't it?
That far-right bandwagon, which you and I have been riding for a long, long time, according to Starmer's interpretation of things, has just driven hundreds of horses and coaches through this government and trampled on their pathetic reputation.
Yeah, exactly right. And as if to sort of show just how ludicrous the whole system has been, one particular grooming gang ringleader who was actually jailed back in sort of 2012, I think it was, he was locked up for 77 years, right? He was then released into the back into the population. He was supposed to have been deported, right? But he still hasn't been because he basically gave up his dual Pakistani citizenship, and so we apparently now can't deport him.
Surrendered.
He's a taxi driver.
Oh, so many of them were taxi drivers. And of course, Baroness Casey made considerable mention about the lax licensing laws that allowed them to get away with them, and of course, transport these kids around the country. But that character you're talking about there, that verminous piece of filth who was a child rapist, surrendered his Pakistani nationality 5 days before he was due to go in front of the appeal court. And then, of course, they can't deport him.
They can't deport him.
Because he surrendered it. It's a nonsense.
It really is.
You should be able to say exceptional circumstances off you go.
Exactly.
You piece of garbage.
Or if you want to stay in this country, we'll put you back in prison. Or
Forever.
something like that, you know, forever. Even The Guardian have had to put it on their front page today.
Yeah.
That tells you something, because you said members of the media. I mean, how many times have you sat on panels in television studios and been told that you're a right-wing racist bigot for even bringing the subject up? Who can forget just the other day, what's her name, Lucy Powell, having a go at Tim Montgomery when he suggested that there was a problem and referred to a Panorama documentary, and she said, oh, we're going to go for that old dog whistle, are we? Remember that?
Yeah.
You know,
Lucy
Powell still has an awful lot to answer for, and she said nothing, as far as I can see. I watched Jess Phillips last night talking about this, and even she is now saying that she's going to have to, you know, study the facts to see whether or not it's true that Pakistani men are overwhelmingly involved in this kind of activity, because of course she's desperate to try and get away from losing her seat, which she will lose if apparently she upsets anybody in her Pakistani community in Birmingham. Have a look at what she had to say yesterday.
What Baroness Casey has recommended, which we will undertake, is the mandatory recording of ethnicity of perpetrators of child sexual abuse. What she has looked at, admittedly, just in 3 police force areas in the review, found an overrepresentation of Asian or British Pakistani origin males. It doesn't matter how I feel about that. Those are the facts. And if we ignore that, how can we ever come up with solutions?
Well, yeah, but you did ignore it for years and years.
And she's so wrong, because actually it really does matter how she feels about that, because it shows whether she's on our side or whether she's chosen some other kind of side in this absolutely disgraceful national scandal. And I'll tell you another reason why it matters, because yesterday Yvette Cooper said, and I quote, "This will take all of us." Okay? All of us to get to sort this matter out. She was addressing the nation. You, me, listeners, viewers, all of us, she said. So Jess Phillips' views do matter, and we all must, in some way, shape or form, apparently, play a part in doing this. So, what do I interpret that as? Well, where are the community leaders amongst the communities that were doing this systematic repeat offending? Have we heard from those within the Asian or Pakistani communities?
I've not seen anything.
No.
I've not seen anything at all. And one of the problems with all of these areas where it happened is that they are mostly run by Labour councils. They are mostly up to their necks in it. Many of the people who worked in the councils, many of the people who worked in the police, many of the people who worked in the community, they all knew what was going on. Some of them were even carrying on the actual behaviour itself. That's the amazing thing. Let's have a look at Yvette Cooper finally admitting yesterday what we've just known all the time.
And she refers to examples of organisations avoiding the topic altogether for fear of appearing racist or raising community tensions. These findings are deeply disturbing, but most disturbing of all, as Baroness Casey makes clear, is the fact that too many of these findings are not new.
Exactly right. They're not new. We knew about these findings. We knew, those of us who talked about it knew about it. They didn't want to admit it. That's not the same thing.
My deep, deep concern is about accountability. Because Cooper yesterday talked about accountability of organisations. But she didn't say individuals. Now, there's a crime called misconduct in public office. So if you're a police officer, social worker, anybody who gets paid out of the public purse, basically, and you commit misconduct, that is a crime. You can be charged, you can go to court, and invariably people that are found guilty of that crime face pretty stern punishments because you're a public official or a publicly paid person. Now, misconduct in public office is a very unusual crime because doing nothing can constitute that crime. You see, with most crimes, you have to do something.
Absolutely.
You know, you clump someone, you steal something, you drive when you're drunk, you know, you do an illegal act. With misconduct in public office, you can do nothing. In other words, ignore it. In other words, do nothing when you should be doing something. So, I hope that the National Crime Agency and this inquiry, as part of their workload, look in to trying to prosecute individuals. Those cowardly police officers who, in their desperation to climb the promotion ladder, didn't rock the boat. Nothing to see here.
Yes.
Move along. We're not going to go and investigate these people and charge them. Those people. I want to see them in the dock.
Yeah. Let's have a look at the Yvette Cooper apology from yesterday.
On behalf of this and past governments and the many public authorities who let you down, I want to reiterate an unequivocal apology for the unimaginable pain and suffering that you have suffered and the failure of our country's institutions through decades to prevent that harm and keep you safe. But words are not enough. Victims and survivors need action. The reforms I've set out today will mean the strongest action any government has taken to tackle child sexual exploitation, more police investigations, more arrests, a new inquiry, changes to the law to protect children, and a fundamental overhaul of the way organisations work to support victims and put perpetrators behind bars.
Now, those of you who are watching that will see that she's flanked on one side by Bridget Phillipson, Secretary of State for Education, and Angela Rayner, Deputy Prime Minister, and Secretary of State for Housing and Levelling Up, I think, right? They look about as grim as can be because they know exactly what they've been doing over the course of the last several years, and they know exactly what they've been... Who can forget that picture of Angela Rayner sitting in that room with all those Muslim men before the election, promising them that they would absolutely, if they got elected, you know, campaign for a free Palestine, for a start, right? Now, let's have a look just back to January, only 6 months ago. This is where they were.
Calling for inquiries because they want to jump on a bandwagon of the far right. Then that affects politics.
No, the reason we're not doing another national inquiry is because there's already been a national inquiry.
Do you want an inquiry or not?
No, Paul, I'm trying to answer your question, and the answer is no. We don't think another inquiry, after all the many inquiries that we've put victims through, is the way to tackle this.
There has been a huge amount of misinformation this week. Sadly, party political misinformation. It is just wrong.
We've already had a lengthy inquiry, which ended...
broad inquiry that encompassed some parts of the, you know, some towns, 6 towns, I believe. 50 towns have been blighted by this issue. We don't know if it's still going on now. That inquiry was a much broader inquiry.
So you're right in saying it's broad, but we've got to look at the, what Professor Jay has said as well, which is that this doesn't need a further inquiry. And actually, it's time for action.
Betrayed by the state, Peter. I don't think there's a better headline this morning. That's the front page of The Sun. Tony says this: police, politicians, lawyers and the mainstream media hid the truth about rape gangs. Starmer must know some Labour Party officials are deeply implicated. And Mick says the disgraced police chiefs, councillors, CPS lawyers and social workers must be exposed now. Some are now MPs and are still in positions of power. We've got so much to talk about on this. We'll take your views, obviously, as we always do, because what you want to say to us is very important. 0344 499 1000. Send us a voice note. It's me and Peter Blexley. We'll be back after this.
Of doing the world a service, of destroying the Iranian nuclear project before Iran could get nukes. But let's not mistake ourselves into thinking that this conflict started on Friday. The Iranian regime has been waging a war of aggression against Israel on 7 fronts since the October 7th massacre. That's when Hamas, an Iranian proxy army, invaded Israel and was then joined by Hezbollah, the Houthis, and other Iranian proxy forces across the region, raining missiles against Israel from every direction.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. 25 minutes past 6. I'm Mike Graham. It's one big story in town this morning, although there are other things that we will be bringing you over the course of the next 3.5 hours. Ryan Saby, for one, over in Canada, where he is with Keir Starmer and the rest of the G7 leaders. But the front pages this morning very much tell the same story. And the story is, as I said, even on the front page of The Guardian, in which they say the ethnicity of grooming gangs was, in their words, shied away from. A culture of blindness, ignorance and prejudice led to repeated failures over decades to properly investigate cases in which children suffered appalling abuse and violence from grooming gangs. This is the report authored by Louise Casey, who said for too long the authorities have shied away from the ethnicity of the people involved and said it was not racist to examine the ethnicity of the defenders. I mean, it's of the offenders, rather. It's almost like you don't have to say that. Why should you have to say that to people who are investigators? The police, you can answer for them because you know how the police system works in this country. But, you know, what I don't get, and I asked this question yesterday, is why would people be frightened of causing, you know, community tensions by arresting some ghastly, creepy, horrible rapists, no matter what their ethnicity was?
So how do the police and governments have such clear data on stop and search, right? So they are allowed to say, as they always do, you are 7 times more likely to be stopped and searched if you are black or Asian.
Yeah.
How do they have that data? Because it is recorded.
Yes.
Each stop and search is recorded.
Right.
Like each arrest should be recorded.
Yes.
The ethnicity of the offender should be recorded.
Yes.
Why wasn't it?
Right.
Because they, once again, like we've discussed earlier, were afraid of the truth.
Yeah.
They didn't want to rock the boat. The Labour Party don't want to upset their bloc Muslim votes. The police didn't want to upset Pakistani Muslim communities because they're cowards.
But my point is, Peter, not, and I take all that, and I know all that, but what I'm saying is that why would you be upsetting a community by rooting out the most vile, ghastly criminal elements of that community? If you came to my street and said, we're going to take those people there and we're going to lock them in the back of a police van because they've been robbing everybody else, why would I turn around and go, oh, but what about the community cohesion of the street? We don't want to do that. Why would people not want these ghastly, horrible rapists to be taken out of their community and put behind bleeding bars?
Exactly.
And people who don't want that to happen should also be prosecuted.
Well, back to Cooper's point that this is going to take all of us to resolve this matter.
Yeah.
I very much look forward to hearing from Pakistani community leaders, imams and all that kind of stuff, stepping forward, coming on Talk perhaps, to say how much they condemn the offending and how much they will assist the authorities in rooting these offenders out and seeing them where they belong. Let's look forward to that,
shall we? That would be nice. And also, isn't it also rather despicable, and I use that word carefully, that Keir Starmer announced this over the weekend because he had a heads up, obviously, on this Baroness's report. He knew it was coming. He'd had it for quite a while, in fact, as it turns out. And he announces it literally as he's about to take off and get on a plane and go to Canada for a G7. So he has not really been in any way, shape or form held to account yet. But he will be when he gets back.
And do you know why he's done this? He's done it to protect his position.
Yeah.
He's done it to retain power. He's done it for himself.
Because he doesn't fancy the idea of what this inquiry is going to dig up. And that is absolutely and utterly true. Now, the other thing that people, that I've been saying and you've been saying as well, is what about all these illegal boat migrants that have been coming here? What have they been up to? Have a look at what Vivek Cooper's got to say about asylum seekers.
Baroness Casey reports that she came across cases involving suspects who were asylum seekers. We have asked her team to provide to the Home Office all the evidence that they found, so the immigration enforcement can immediately pursue individual cases with the police. But let me make clear, those who groom children or who commit sexual offences will not be granted asylum in the UK. We will do everything in our power to remove them. I do not believe the law is strong enough that we have inherited, so we are bringing forward a change to the law so that anyone convicted of sexual offences is excluded from the asylum system and denied refugee status. We've already increased the removal of foreign national offenders by 14% since the election, and we're drawing up new arrangements to identify and remove those who have committed a much wider range of offences.
I mean, what sort of country have we become that you have to say that you have to say that we're going to deny you the ability to seek asylum in this country if you commit sexual offences against children? I mean, hello?
That change in the law is just complete waffle for as long as we are bound to the European Convention on Human Rights, because that creates pathways through which people can appeal any decision made in this country.
Right, and she also used that caveat within our powers. Everything within our powers we can do.
Because...
Which means we're not going to do anything.
Because they don't want to withdraw from it.
No.
I understand it's complex and the Northern Ireland, you know, the Good Friday Agreement is tied to it and all that, but look,
Don't
come
get
on.
me started on released IRA terrorists.
But let's just look at this. This is a national scandal.
Yeah.
It's on every front page of the newspapers.
Some people are calling it the biggest cover-up ever in Britain.
And it is therefore, in my opinion, a national emergency.
Yeah.
We should be invoking special powers to assist the investigators and those so that we can remove from this country all these offenders after they've served their time in jail. Straight onto an airplane, straight out of this country. Let's call it what it is. It's an emergency. Let's have emergency powers and let's deal with it.
Yeah, absolutely right. Couldn't agree more. More of your messages coming through. You can text them to us at 87222. You can voice note us at 0344 499 1000. Here's one from Tony.
Morning, Mike. Morning, Peter. It's Tony from Nottingham. I'm a former police officer. I've spoken to you before. One question I've got is, when I was in the police, one of the big things they used to go on about all the time was hate crime. So one ethnicity targeted another, for instance. Now, to my understanding, none of this grooming has been treated as a hate crime. And I wonder if Peter knows why, because I don't, and I've asked the question. And I feel sure if it was large groups of white men targeting Muslim girls, it certainly would be. Thank you.
Good question. Why is it not a hate crime?
Take a bow, Tony.
Yeah.
There's a shiver going down my spine as a result of him mentioning that. What a great point he's raised.
Absolutely.
What an absolutely brilliant, on the nail point that he has brought to our attention this morning. Yes.
And he's a police officer.
Why are these not classified as hate crimes? There clearly must be an element of hate.
Surely there must be.
Derogatory names that they called these victims.
Well, also it's a racial motivated attack, surely. You know, they were only raping white girls. They weren't raping girls, they were raping white girls.
That is an astonishing point.
Surely that's a racial crime, isn't it?
Yeah.
A hate crime, surely. Well, we'll try and get Yvette Cooper on the show. Some chance of that. Got more chance of deporting that bloke from Pakistan who hasn't got a passport anymore. Anyway, listen, this is, of course, the home of common sense. This from Richard. What's the likelihood that we'll hear the rhetoric from the authorities? We'll learn lessons. And Jill from Cheshire. There's something very sinister about a country's leaders who refuse to want to protect its citizens, especially their children. It makes them complicit and dangerous. I worry, along with you, that high-profile people were involved and the system is frantically trying to protect them. I've got no doubt about any of that, Jill. Absolutely right. The people who listen to this show and watch it know more than this government does, and I'm sick to death of having to ask the question, why did this happen? Why are they covering up? Why, even in January, did they tell us that they didn't think there should be an inquiry? And now they're all running around like they've just gone, oh my God, I've discovered gambling in a casino. You know, idiots. It's 6:34. Sorry, Peter, I'll be back.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 6:36. An awful lot of messages coming in from all of you out there. I'm really grateful to you. We'll try and get to all of them. Peter Blexy's here with us as well. Just a little detour away from the grooming gang story, the rape gang story, and Baroness Casey's report. We're going to pop over to Canada because Ryan Saby's there for The Sun, Deputy Political Editor and Economics Editor as well, over in Canada, in a place called Kananaskis, I think. Is that the right spelling? Ryan, very good right pronunciation. Ryan, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike. That's right. Yeah, you got that one right.
Oh, amazing. Well, it's a good start. Kananaskis, I understand that you got a question into President Trump yesterday. Let's have a look.
The UK is very well protected. You know why? Because I like them. That's why. That's their ultimate protection. Thank you very much.
And that's Trump answering Ryan Saby's question there. There was also a very funny moment, was there not, when Trump presented the kind of the trade deal papers to Keir Starmer, and then they dropped them, and Starmer had to sort of scramble around the ground to pick them up.
That's right. They walked out, and within a few moments, Donald Trump wanted to show off this shiny red folder, open it up and show off the signature that had signed this trade agreement. Then all of a sudden, the papers fell on the floor, and it was left to Keir Starmer to actually pick them up. I thought the other thing that was quite interesting, that when he announced this deal, he said he'd signed it with the European Union, and everyone kind of looked at each other and moved swiftly on.
Yes.
But, when he dropped those papers, it was the Prime Minister who was there to do the legwork.
Yeah, I think we've got the clip now. Let's have a quick look.
Prime Minister of the UK, and we just signed a document. This is sorry about that. This is it.
A very important document.
Little windy out here. Give me that. We just signed it, and it's done. And so we have our trade agreement with the European Union, and it's a fair deal for both.
So he says the European Union. I mean, does he think that Starmer's that close to the European Union? He might as well just lump them all together.
He must have been thinking about Keir in that second referendum while he was in opposition. But I think on a serious point, when it comes to Donald Trump, I think he just met, or is just about to meet, Ursula von der Leyen. So I think that may have just been in his mind. But it was quite a faux pas when to confuse the European Union and the United Kingdom.
Yeah, I understand Trump has now left the G7 meeting because he wouldn't go along. Front page of the Times today's got a story saying he wouldn't go along with the urging of Israel to call a ceasefire in their battle with Iran right now. And he's now, I think, announced that he's left the G7 to go and try and sort out the Middle East.
That's right. All G7 members, normally at the end of a G7 or one of these big summits, there's a big communique at the end. But what they have done, all seven sort of the members of the G7 have signed a communique or sort of a statement, really calling for de-escalation in the Middle East. But when Trump left, it did actually catch a lot of people by surprise. There was rumours that he was going straight back to Washington, but he actually did stay for the leaders' dinner. He also did pose for the family photo, and then he's gone back. There have been rumours that he's going to convene the National Security Council in Washington, but they are unconfirmed at the moment, and that would take place in the Situation Room. This is a very fluid situation, but one of the things he did say before he actually left Canada was that everyone get out of Tehran. So it's, whether he knows something that we don't or we didn't, let's wait and see.
Okay. I think we have a little clip of Trump actually announcing that he's leaving.
Okay, President, any statement on why you're leaving the G7 early for Washington?
Well, I have to be back. Very important. I want to just thank our great host. He did a fantastic job. Thank you in Canada. But you probably see what I see, and I have to be back as soon as I can. I'm going to have dinner with these wonderful leaders, and then I get on the plane. I have to be back early.
Have you talked to the National Security Council?
I loved it. I tell you, I loved it. And I think we got a lot done. Really a lot done. In fact, UK, we signed a big trade deal today, and we're working on others, but we had just a really great relationship with everybody, and it's really nice. I wish I could stay for tomorrow, but they understand.
Is there a reason, Mr. President, that you can't?
It's all going to be a bit pointless without Trump, I guess. But any idea, Brian, whether anybody's going to be able to put a question to Keir Starmer about this Casey report? Because that's the big story, obviously, here, front page of The Sun, and lots of other newspapers this morning. A lot of people very keen to hear from Keir Starmer on this.
Yeah, no, I think what normally happens during these summits is that the leaders, particularly the Prime Minister and this Prime Minister, like those who've come before him, do sit down with broadcasters. They do talk with print journalists. So I would expect to see something tomorrow, today, where he will actually sit down and talk to them and be held to account. And they'll be on a whole range of issues, whether it's the Middle East, whether it is grooming gangs, or whether it's Ukraine, or why Donald Trump has left the G7 early. So I'd expect a whole array of subjects to be asked.
OK, good stuff. Great to talk to you, Ryan. Good luck. Thank you very much indeed. Deputy Police Editor and Economics Editor there from The Sun over in Canada at the G7. You know, I think Keir Starmer, as you've just said, Peter, because this is a state of emergency, because there should be an emergency, situation, there should be a statement from Keir Starmer. It should have been one yesterday, and there should certainly be one today. If he's going to wait till tomorrow, that'll be yet another sort of weaseling out of something, won't it?
We know this abominable man only commissioned Baroness Casey to look at this because he was boxed into a corner.
And he hoped that she would come back and say there wasn't any need for an inquiry.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Because all of these facts that are coming out and all of those things that Yvette Cooper said that they've now discovered, surely they must have known about these things inside of the government. I'm not talking about the local, Labour councillors. I'm talking about inside of this Labour government. He was the head of the CPS, for heaven's sake, as he always tells us.
And on that very note, of course, as Yvette Cooper told us yesterday, hundreds of cases, possibly going into the thousands of cases, are going to be looked at again, where victims did not get justice, where people said, no, not enough evidence. They're going to have to be looked at again because it's felt they were probably inadequately investigated. Because, of course, what were people routinely saying? Nothing to see here, move along now.
Exactly. And now they're going to review, this is on the front page of the Mirror, 1,000 rape gang cases, review them, the ones that got away, as it were. It's extraordinary stuff. Coming up, we're going to look at some of the other stories in the paper. We've got another Islamist chucking boiling water over a prison warder. Smoky bacon crisps have been vetoed by the European Union in a new rule that has been made since Keir Starmer reset the Brexit deal. And the Spanish, apparently, are taking away sunbeds. So when you get to your resort, you'll have to lie in the sand on a towel, just like the old days. 6:43.
Come from the chamber listening to the Home Secretary, and I have to tell you, the most extraordinary thing was the agreement of all the Labour MPs who stood up and congratulated the Home Secretary, saying how pleased they were there was a national inquiry. These are the same Labour MPs that just months ago said how pleased they were that there wasn't a national inquiry, it wasn't necessary, and actually voted against a Tory amendment to have a national inquiry. The pure hypocrisy.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, coming up to 6:46 in the morning. Peter Blexley's here with me. We've been covering the one big story that there is to be talking about this morning, and that is, of course, the grooming gangs report, the Baroness Casey report, which came out yesterday. Betrayed by the state is what it says on the front page of The Sun. We'll come back to that, because coming up we're going to be talking to Katie Lamb MP, Shadow Home Office Minister for the Tory Party, and also Sarah Pochin from Reform, about this dreadful, ghastly story and why and how it could have possibly happened in the way that it did. But a couple of things to mention, Peter, while we're here. There's been another incident inside a prison. This time another Islamist young offender has somehow been able to have a kettle in his cell. He's boiled the kettle, he's added some sugar to it, and he's chucked it over a prison officer.
And of course, boiled water with sugar added to it sticks to the victim.
Right.
And increases the scalding and the damage.
It's like toffee almost, isn't it?
Yeah, it's pretty horrible, truly hideous. And it's
how's he got a kettle in his bleeding cell?
There you go. That's what you get in a liberal, fluffy, woke karate world, where prisoners' rights and privileges would appear to be more important than the safety of staff. Yeah. And that is, of course, utterly shameful. But of course, it's symptomatic of what goes throughout our public service. Yeah. The police, the prison service, all these staff that work for them are all this left-leaning, not all, majority of this left-leaning liberal kind of nonsense. Right. And they drive these agendas, and that's why you end up with prisoners not going to jail for long enough, being released too early, and prison staff not being suitably protected.
Exactly right. I remember talking to a prison association representative who said that one of the reasons why they don't, for example, wear body armour in prison is because the powers that be didn't want them to look too confrontational. Yeah. And you go, what do you mean? Of course you're going to be confrontational. These are the lags. These are in prison for a reason. You're not about to be nice to them. And apparently, from what we hear from Robert Jenrick, an awful lot of prisons are now being run not by the prison officers, but by these Asian gangs. Yep. Muslim gangs.
That's the same powers that be that do not patrol the landings and sit in their offices thinking they're extremely important because they've got a lanyard round their neck. Probably a pride lanyard.
Probably.
Yeah, and then of course they're so important.
Colours.
Yeah, they're so important, and they want everybody to know it, that they wear that lanyard on the train on the way home.
Oh yeah.
They're the sort of people that have wrecked and continue to wreck this country. Yeah. Where on earth is the common sense where people say best person gets the job, prison staff have more rights than offenders, they should be protected, and the such like.
Yeah, it's not difficult, is it?
No.
Now, this one will really wind you up if you're a fan of Brexit or if you're not a fan of the European Union. So Keir Starmer, of course, famously just a couple of weeks ago invited all the European Union leaders into Downing Street and decided it would be a really great idea to reset the European relationship, right? So that we've now given away more of our fishing rights. We've given them more money to stop the migrants coming. None of that has actually worked. We've also signed up to some more food trading standards, rules and regulations. Yep. And it turns out that as a result of that, British crisp manufacturers have to change their recipes in order to serve Mount Masters in Brussels. And smoky bacon flavour, apparently, is one of those that's going to have to change its recipe because, according to the EU rules, some of the ingredients in smoky bacon flavoured crisps might cause cancer.
There we are, all thoroughly beholden.
Sir Keir Starlin.
Yeah, exactly. Beholden to the EU once again.
Right.
When did we rejoin the EU? Did I miss it?
I think you missed it, yeah.
Did I?
Yeah, it was a very stealthily done operation.
Yeah, clearly.
Under the cloak of darkness. Yeah. It was carried out without any of us knowing.
See, I thought once upon a time we voted to leave the EU.
We did.
Did we?
Yeah, by a majority.
Yeah.
But Keir Starmer didn't like that because he wanted to have a second referendum. Do you remember?
Right. Oh.
He said we should have a second referendum because politics doesn't just happen in one period of 24 hours, does it?
No.
Maybe we should have another election while we're at it.
Well, maybe if
why don't we do that?
Maybe if you are a supporter of Brexit and you continue to criticise the ever closer relationship that we're having with Europe, perhaps you're just jumping on a far-right bandwagon.
That's very possible, and it's dangerous, that. Although it tends to happen that if you do jump on a far-right bandwagon, you're actually just on the right bandwagon.
Correct.
Because it turns out that that's where you should have always been, because that's where the truth is. So the Prime Minister has now agreed that this must be done. So smoky bacon crisps will have to be completely reinvented. What a load of old cobblers.
Yep. One thing that I took from this story that did make me smile, though, is that there is a body called the Potato Processing Association. And I think that's brilliant. I'd love to go to their Christmas party.
You know, I'm surprised that, and this, you may not know this about me, but I applied for some very strange jobs when I was trying to break into journalism. And I'm surprised that I didn't apply to be the editor of the
Potato
Processing Association's, you know, annual thing, because I got shortlisted, believe it or not, and I've told this story many times, to be editor of the Shoe and Leather News, which was based just around the back of Old Street.
Yeah.
I got shortlisted, and apparently I only didn't get the job, the guy said, because I was too young, because I was only 21. And he said he thought I might not have enough experience of shoe and leather. But,
cobblers.
You know, cobblers, indeed. How about Royal Ascot starts today. Lots of, apparently the King is harbouring lofty hopes for the mother of all victories on the opening day of Ascot. Apparently he's got a horse called Reaching High. For those of you who like a little flutter on the Jesus, we'll be talking about this a bit later on, actually, with the Sun's tipster.
Well, do you remember when his horse won? Obviously inherited from his mum, who absolutely loved Ascot.
She loved horses.
And there he was, all dewy-eyed when his horse won. And what about when the Queen eventually had a winner at Royal Ascot?
She was brilliant.
That was unbelievable that afternoon.
Yeah, everybody loved that. And this one will really get your goat as well if you want to have a bit of a row with the Europeans. It's page 17 of The Sun. The sunbeds in Mallorca are cut back by nearly a quarter. It works if you read it like a Cockney.
Yeah, yeah.
It's very good.
Lorraine Chase.
Apparently, grouchy beach bosses are scrapping nearly a quarter of Mallorca's sunbeds on popular beaches in a bid to put off tourists. I don't know what's wrong with the Spanish lately. You know, they seem to have worked out that it's better if they don't have any tourism, which, of course, will mean that they've hardly got much of an economy to begin with. They haven't got any tourism. You might as well forget about it.
Yeah, there's been protests and unpleasantness, and people at the weekend were running around squirting tourists.
Yeah.
With water, apparently, out of water pistols. There was some question mark as to whether it actually was water, but it wasn't making tourists feel very welcome or very much.
I find it extraordinary why they're doing this, you know. And people, of course, in Britain, you know, stiff upper lip and all that. They're quoting hairdresser Nigel Oxby from Doncaster, who says, "I'll just come down with my towel if I really want to go to the beach. There's tons of other beaches with nothing on them. If you're a local and you don't like tourists, then there's other places to go." I mean, I remember when I was a kid, you go to beaches all the time that didn't have any sunbeds on them. You know, it's not like the end of the world, is it? You just you know, set yourself up, you get yourself a little umbrella, and lie on a towel.
Well, even
covered in sand.
Even when I was like in my younger days, going on 1830s holidays, yes, guilty as charged.
Okay,
had a wonderful time.
I'm sure.
Absolutely loved them.
Yeah.
But you couldn't afford a sunbed in those days.
No.
So you stuck your towel on the sand anyway.
Right.
Because they charge you a few
It's one of those
potatoes.
things that you now kind of, you go to some of these resorts and the ludicrous nature of the charges where they go, do you want one in the front row?
Yeah.
And they want you to pay some ludicrous amount of money for it.
Yeah.
And then if you don't want one in the front row, the third row is a little bit cheaper, the second row... When I was in Dubai, they didn't charge you for that. In fact, I had a guy, this is how great it was there, a guy came up to me and I thought, oh, here we go, he's going to start selling me some shells or some watches or something.
Yeah.
Because he's got a little black bag. And he walks up to me, and I'm on the sunbed, and he goes, "Excuse me, sir, would you like me to clean your glasses for you?" And I went, "Yeah, all right then." So he took my glasses, he had this little, you know, gizmo, cleaned them, gave them back to me. Didn't ask for any money or anything.
Really?
Brilliant.
Did you feel like you should have, you know...
I mean, they rinsed me at the front desk, don't worry. But, you know, so I got my glasses cleaned for free, but there we are.
Well, on this very story, there's somebody called Pere Jean, Joan, forgive my pronunciation, 26, from an organisation called Less Tourism, More Life.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe that's a sort of Spanish Just Stop Oil type
I suspect it is, yeah. Yeah. Jets privados. Stop private jets, I suppose that means. And there's, I mean, get a life. These Spanish need to get a life, really. Meanwhile, back in the old world of political correctness, apparently using the word gents is an old-fashioned, not inclusive and unacceptable word to use in today's offices. There was a tribunal case where a woman was objecting to the fact that her boss used to send emails starting with "Good day, gents," or "Good morning, gents," or "Gents, this is what we're up against." I mean, I can see how, you know, that might not be the best idea you've ever had.
Yeah, and they've added it to lads, because there was another case a couple of weeks earlier.
Right.
Said lads. Now, all right, I mean, if you're in a men's football team, I think you could probably walk into the changing room and say, "Good morning, gents," couldn't you?
Or lads.
Without having to go on a blooming tribunal for saying it.
You would think.
But if you're in an office where there are both men and women, then perhaps...
And it turns out her unfair dismissal claim was rejected by the panel, so at least there's some hope of common sense in the world.
Yeah, the judge said, the word gents is a bit kind of, a bit clumsy, but it doesn't constitute a negative finding against them. So a little bit of common sense appeared to have reigned there.
Yes, thank goodness for that. Let's get a voice note back on the migrant freebies from Andrew, because this is about what's going on in Kent.
Andrew from Perthshire. You're talking about driving lessons for migrants. I'm a flight instructor and I know at least 3 migrants who are taking flying lessons.
Flying lessons for migrants? That's a bit worrying. Remember 9/11?
Yeah, exactly.
Eh? I mean, they took flying lessons in Florida.
On that note, let's remember, the Sun took photographs yesterday of people getting on more boats.
Yeah.
The Home Office data isn't available yet. I've been checking. Right.
It was a free-for-all yesterday in France.
Yeah, so we'll find out later on today how many came in. 1,500 in 4 days last week.
Yeah.
1,500 in 4 days. Asylum seekers. And what did the report from Baroness Casey say yesterday? Oh, yes, some of the child rapists are asylum seekers. This is a state of emergency, special legislation. Now, stop the boats, kick out the pedos.
Stop the boats. It's unbelievable, isn't it? How on earth can that still be the case? This from Chris in Croydon. Mike, they're not grooming gangs, these are rape gangs. It's time that we remove these people from our country. If the country of origin refuses to accept them or let them apply for a passport, we immediately sanction them, ban all of their citizens from coming here and withhold all foreign aid until they do. Absolutely right. Bessie says this, morning Mike from glorious Zurich this week, clean, safe, working, no scroats in face masks on bikes, 20% tax, everyone working, contributing, and a public transport system that works. That's in Switzerland.
I went to Rome last week. I had a great pleasure going to Rome. Now, Rome
used to be a place you'd worry about going because of all the street crime, but it's probably not as bad as it is here now, is it?
Half as much crime as in the UK.
Right.
And twice as many police officers. Do the maths, it's pretty simple.
That is pretty straightforward, isn't it?
It really is.
But again, it used to be that you would go to places like Italy and you'd marvel at the fact that they could even run the country because they were so politically unstable. And there was so much criminality going on the streets, and you get your purse stolen or your handbag nicked or your watch stolen. But now, we seem to have imported all of that. So we've got all the people committing all the crime, and the rest of Europe is actually a lot better.
And the police officers I saw last week, by crikey, male or female, you wouldn't want to row with them.
No.
There was no huge, great, obese ones waddling about, you know what I mean?
Right.
They all looked like they could shift some furniture.
Yeah.
The overwhelming majority of them were armed, and there was always a readied hand at or on the weapon.
Yes.
They looked the business.
Right.
Their uniforms were impeccable, pressed, you know, shoes polished, all that kind of stuff. You could have eaten your dinner off the bonnet of their police vehicles.
So important.
Yeah.
And they weren't painted in rainbow colours either.
No high vis in sight either.
Amazing. Have we got time to play Andy's voice note? Let's get it on.
Morning, Mike and Pete. It's Andy from Birmingham. You're both right, lads. I mean, saying that it's a stain on our nation, this grooming gang scandal. It'll never be erased, but all we can try and do, all of us, I mean, she's got Yvette Cooper's about all of us, but I mean the public as well. We've got to push and try and get justice for these poor girls. And while I'm on as well, does that mean the little Sadiq Khan in London's going to have an inquiry? Because I think he was a bit quick to put doubt on that a few months ago when he said he wasn't having an inquiry. So will he be forced now to have an inquiry? Anyway, lads, good day. Ta-ra, mate.
Andy, thanks very much indeed. We've got lots more coming up. Thanks to Peter Blexley. Good to see you. I'll be back after the news with loads more right here on Talk. We've just been talking in the office here about how many of us have been attacked at some point or other by some form of flying beast or any wildlife. I mean, so we'll take your stories this morning.
Hello, this story is concerning wildlife. It's concerning a rhino.
A rhino? Blimey.
Right? Yeah,
okay.
rhino. I used to live in Kenya when I was about 5 or 6 years old.
Okay.
And we were in this wildlife park in a grey Morris Minot. this rhino started chasing us. There's me and my sister in the back seat.
Right.
It was like something out of Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
We were turning around saying, "Believe it, Dad. Just put your foot down, Dad. We're in a field. Put your foot down." This rhino was chasing us.
One from Mark here in Derby. Went on holiday for our first romantic holiday to Tunisia years ago. Decided to take my girl into a petting zoo. I got a bag of food to feed the animals. A giant goat then went for me, putting its front legs over my shoulders and proceeding to headbutt me over a fence into one of the pens, covering me in the food and making my nose bleed. I got out of the pen, then the goat and all his mates attacked me again, sending me running and screaming like a girl out of the zoo, with my girlfriend rolling with laughter on the floor.
A tarantula climbed up the bottom of the bed on the sheet.
Yeah.
And it walked all the way up. It's eyeball to eyeball.
Wow.
And I thought to myself, what am I going to do when it climbs over my face? But then a miracle happened. It raised its two front legs and waved them around. And then it turned around and walked down the side of the sheet.
Boris Johnson been attacked by an ostrich. The former PM was enjoying a safari trip with his family when the bird leaned into his car and went oi oi and pecked his hand. In footage shared online, he quickly jerked from the ostrich. Don't dirty minds away from the ostrich, and shouted, "Oh, cripes, get hell," before driving off. And so I just set it out there. Have you been attacked by an animal? When I was about 7, says Trevor Jenkins, on holiday in Spain in the 70s, a monkey pulled my long hair. It was long because it was the 70s. I was in floods of tears. And as a family car drove out the car park, an elephant ripped off the car mirror. We got the message. Spanish animals aren't to be trusted. Jeremy, Brittany here from the United States. I was spurred by a rooster in my right foot a few years ago. Spurred? How do you get spurred by a rooster?
One here from Dan in Hampshire. Morning, Mike. As an Aussie that has been dive bombed by our version of the Magpie, which is much bigger, every springtime,
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. Coming up to 3 minutes past 7. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. Of course, Julie Hartley-Brewer will return then to take you all the way through until 1. Massive day today of news. All the front pages absolutely and utterly on one story and one story alone. And that is, of course, the headline in The Sun. Betrayed by the state. Grooming gang victims were failed by cops and public officials, more bothered about dodging claims of racism. Something that we've known about for a long time, something we've talked about for a long time, but something which, of course, this Labour government tried to cover up. They didn't want a national inquiry back in January, as recently as 6 months ago. We've got footage of all of them. We've got Wes Streeting, we've got Yvette Cooper, we've got all manner of people who did not want to have in this government any kind of sign of an investigation into what actually happened over the last several decades in northern cities and towns, many of them controlled by Labour councils, where cover-ups were the order of the day, where dozens and dozens and dozens, probably hundreds of children were raped systematically and continually by gangs of Pakistani men. It's now out in the open thanks to Baroness Louise Casey, who's done a massive report on it, and a great big thank you should go to her. She was commissioned to do it by Sir Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister. He was obviously hoping that she would come back and say, "Oh, nothing to see here. I don't think there's any point in having an inquiry," because their original line was, "We've already had one." But of course they haven't already had one. She's now urging basically for not only an inquiry into the cover-up of the crimes, but also a review now of more than 1,000 different cases of crimes committed which were not prosecuted. Many of the crimes which were not prosecuted were committed during the time when Sir Keir Starmer was head of the Crown Prosecution Service. As he often says, he was the country's top prosecutor, and in fact he could have prosecuted an awful lot more cases. It's true to say that he did prosecute some. It's true to say that he did, in fact, have some impact, but there were an awful lot of cases that simply did not go ahead with prosecutions because of a recommendation from the CPS. So the cover-up starts in north of this north part of this country, many of the cities and towns, places like Doncaster, places like Rotherham, places like Bury, places like Blackburn, places like Burnley, places like Birmingham, Telford, all sorts of places all over the country where children were trafficked, where children were raped, where children were brutally injured and in some cases killed by these gangs. Many of them still going through the court system. It is an absolutely shambolic and shameful episode, the like of which I don't think anybody has ever seen. It's been called, in some cases, the biggest cover-up in the history of the United Kingdom. The Daily Mail goes this morning with, finally, left-wing establishment accepts the truth, a conspiracy of silence over race doomed thousands of girls to abuse. Absolutely extraordinary stuff. And worse than that, asylum seekers are now behind new grooming gang cases as well. This is Morning Glory. We've got lots to talk about. Let's get it on. Phil in Coventry says, morning, Mike. I think we're getting there. Keep up the good work. It's all starting to crumble. Starmer, Khan, Labour, they've been found out. People's eyes are opening. It's taken a long time. Have a great day. Absolutely right. And so many of you have got things to say about this story. It is such an awful story and such terrible details. Tom from Colchester, you don't call everyone calling for national inquiries jumping on the far-right bandwagon if you think Baroness Casey was going to call for one. Starmer was convinced Casey wouldn't recommend this, and now he has egg on his face. What a fool. Tom, I think you're absolutely right. And we need to hear from Keir Starmer. You know, he's in Canada. He announced that this inquiry was going to go ahead shortly before he left for Canada. He hasn't really spoken about it. He hasn't really been questioned about it. Nobody's had a chance to put any questions to him. He's left it all to his minions, as he often does. Yvette Cooper yesterday apologising in the House of Commons. But James Heal is here. Just before we talk to him, Deputy Political Editor of The Spectator, let's listen to this voice note from Liam.
Morning, Mike and Peter. Liam from Kent. I'm going to get straight to it. This is a disgrace. Absolute disgrace. We all knew the truth, and the Labour government didn't. This should be the beginning of the end for all of them. It is absolutely disgusting what they have been covering up. I mean, and the police. We need more police like Mr. Peter Blexley. Anyway, guys, have a great morning. Take care.
Liam, thank you very much indeed. Let's talk to James Heal, Deputy Political Editor at The Spectator. James, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike.
It's a pretty dark day this morning, looking at the detail of this Baroness Casey report, not just for the left-wing establishment cover-up, as they call it, on the front page of the Daily Mail, but in The Sun, betrayed by the state. I mean, there's an awful lot of guilty people involved in this cover-up, it seems to me. Is it something that's going to shake the establishment to its foundations, do you think?
Well, it certainly ought to. I mean, the most striking thing for me is, of course, the extent to which this was a level of state failure. And that's also reflected in the gulf of which there have been a lack of prosecutions in all of this. So we need to find people who are going to be responsible. And there was an extraordinary moment in the House of Commons yesterday, Mike, where Sean Davies, the MP for Telford, stood up and suggested that the Tories were to blame for not calling an inquiry sooner, when, of course, he was the local council leader who wrote to Amber Rudd, the then Home Secretary, and opposed it. So, I mean, this is someone who seems to have a lot of, front about this kind of stuff, but we need to call out the people who were involved in it. And, of course, where are they now 10, 15, 20 years on?
Well, as you've just pointed out, some of them have made their way into the House of Commons. Some of them are still members of councils up and down the country. Some of them may have moved into, other jobs in the private sector. But there's certainly people who have benefited, say, for example, from these inquiries not happening and from these investigations not being done properly.
And that will very much be the key test of the response to this report by Dame Louise Casey, which will be, are we actually going to see prosecutions blowing open some of these institutions? Because that's the really striking thing. It was great to hear that 800 cold cases will be investigated. Yeah. The key thing, of course, is speed, because these victims have waited a very long time. And, of course, the longer that we allow things to go, you miss evidence, you miss the chance to prosecute people. And, of course, that will be a key part of ensuring that some kind of retrospective belated justice is done.
Yeah, I mean, I had a really, really interesting voice note this morning from a serving police officer who said he doesn't understand why these crimes are not being treated as hate crimes, because quite frankly, they are clearly exacerbated, they are clearly augmented by a racial factor, and they are clearly crimes against children. So why would they not be categorised so that they could be made more serious, if you like, as being hate crimes?
Yeah, I mean, there certainly is a case for that. I certainly think that. And that was one of the most, I think, striking and belated recognitions in Casey's report, was that actually there was an outside role by certain communities, Pakistani communities, for instance, and that therefore that needs to be investigated thoroughly. The element of race in all this, it was used sort of as a shield to prevent people being prosecuted and investigated. But as you say, it wasn't merely a kind of shield, if you will. It was also an element of attack, in that it was obviously certain communities weaponising it against pretty vulnerable girls. So whatever the most appropriate way of getting prosecutions, that clearly needs to be looked at.
And the thing about this Labour government, in particular Keir Starmer, you know, he made a very, very big thing in January of this year, only 6 months ago, basically that if you were calling for an inquiry, a national inquiry on this particular subject, on this ghastly event which has been going on and ongoing for decades, you were somehow jumping on a far-right bandwagon.
Yes, I mean, this were the comments he made, and then he sort of reiterated a version of that in the House Commons, suggesting that Tories were jumping on a bandwagon. I mean, and the obvious insinuation there being that perhaps they were linked to these calls from certain elements of the online right. Look, just because, some unsavoury individuals, people who Keir Starmer doesn't particularly like, who might not particularly like Elon Musk, just because they were calling for an inquiry doesn't mean, of course, that those victims, etc., were wrong to do so. And what was so striking, there was a vote in the House of Commons at the time. It was linked to the education bill that was going through. Labour voted that down because they said they would otherwise kill the bill. Equally, though, Keir Starmer ought, the week after, to have then had a separate vote on an inquiry, acted much quicker than he did, rather than wait 5 months to find out what we all knew was pretty obvious in coming down the track, which was that an inquiry was needed to look at the different issues and treat it as a systemic issue rather than kind of local ones where the local authorities might have an incentive to cover things up.
And as ever now, he's making out that, he's changed his mind because he's been advised to do so. He doesn't seem to realise that in politics you seem to look rather, shall we say, wishy-washy at the very least, weak at best, if you keep changing your mind just because somebody persuades you to change it.
Yes, I mean, look, that's leadership is meant to be all about, isn't it? You're meant to have a strong sense of what's right, what's wrong, how you're going to react to things, shape events rather than be shaped by them. And I think that, this is one of the crazy things about, a year on Keir Starmer's leadership, how much political capital has been burnt for stupid causes, whether that be U-turning on winter fuel, a measure that would save 1.2 billion, whether it's U-turning on the gangs inquiry. It's just silly stuff. And I think Labour MPs are increasingly frustrated. And, you talked at the beginning of this clip, Mike, about how Labour front benches have been sent out there to defend this policy. I mean, one of the reasons why Boris Johnson eventually went by Tory backbenchers because they were sick of going out and defending the indefensible. I'm not saying we're anywhere near that just yet, but I do think that Keir Starmer's MPs and ministers will be like, why on earth did we spend so much time arguing against an inquiry when most of them, I think they could see that this was going to be inevitable a few months ago.
Well, they now look really, really idiotic, don't they? And, of course, we haven't heard from Keir Starmer. He announced that he was going to have this national inquiry and then jumped on a plane and went to Canada for the G7. And I was just talking to Ryan Sabey, who's there for The Sun, with the Prime Minister, and he hasn't addressed this report yet. And he says he might do it tomorrow because obviously he's kind of trying to hide behind, there's far more important things going on. Well, even Donald Trump knows there's not far more important things going on because he's gone back to Washington to deal with the Middle East. So the G7 is a kind of busted flush. So surely Starmer should get on the next plane and fly back.
Yeah, and also I think one of the big criticisms of Starmer, one that seems to have cut through with voters in focus group, is that he's far too out of touch. He's far too enjoying the company of the elite. He enjoys his foreign trips. Now, I think these foreign trips can be important, but equally, to reverse that perception from his point of view, what he ought to do is go out there and do a sort of clip with broadcasters, explain, 10-minute interview, saying how he's going to respond to this, why did he get it wrong, what's his thought process and all of this stuff. Because otherwise it's left to his ministers to front it up, and I can imagine they're not feeling too happy today about it.
No, I'm sure they're not. I mean, big piece in the Mail today by Dan Hodges, who is not exactly a critic of the Labour Party. I mean, he has been very critical of them of late, but I mean, generally he's a supporter of Labour. And he says, Keir Starmer knew, Senior Home Office Minister Jess Phillips knew, they all knew. Yesterday, the wall of deceit, corruption and confusion the government attempted to buttress around the rape gang scandal finally collapsed. I mean, those are pretty strong words. I mean, this is, I think, and I don't think I'm overstating this, this could take this government down, I think, if they get it wrong, if they misstep, and if we discover certain things about Keir Starmer while he ran the CPS, if we discover anything that links Jess Phillips to any sort of cover-up, I mean, this is a very dangerous and incredibly kind of far-reaching investigation, which could finish them off, I think.
Well, I certainly think that it's one that touches on a huge amount of difficult issues for the Labour Party, ones where they probably wouldn't prefer to be spending their time talking about.
Yeah.
They've now been bounced into it. It's amazing, by the way, you mentioned about Jess Phillips. I mean, how absent she's been. She was previously all up last year, etc., and very much, I suspect we won't be seeing too much of her in the near to distant future.
Well, she took quite a long time to say anything, but she did say something yesterday. Here she is talking to the BBC. Check this out.
Maggie Oliver herself, a whistleblower, says Labour and the Tories have both turned a blind eye.
Maggie Oliver is absolutely right. When Sarah Champion came out and spoke about it, at the time, I completely and utterly supported her. So, yeah, look, people have turned a blind eye. There's no I'm not denying that.
Including you?
Absolutely not me. I have never turned a blind eye. I never would shy away from calling a problem what it is.
Oh, really? Well, that's not how everybody else sees it, I think, James, is it?
Well, no, and I think that, you know, there's a lot of Labour MPs who will be looking in the mirror after some of this stuff and how it's been handled. And I'm not saying they're sort of in any way culpable for what went on, but I do think that the response to this has not been one where it's been Labour's best hour, certainly.
No, indeed. And when you see key recommendations of this report saying things like, we need to change the law so any adult who has sex with an under 16-year-old is charged with rape, you know, how is that not the law already?
Well, quite. I mean, you know, this is the French system, I think, where 13 to 15-year-olds are immediately, who have sex with adult men, are immediately charged, involved in rape. And I think that it's something that should have been happening a long time ago. We obviously need to look at different elements of all the sort of institutions of the state. But as you say, Mike, you know, there were questions about why on earth did this happen. And I feel a bit for Louise Casey, of course, looked into this stuff 10 years ago. And you could see in the interview she was doing yesterday on places like Newsnight how frustrated she was at the slackness of it. I think, frankly, a lot of the reasons is people just don't like talking about it because it doesn't fit neatly into a box. It's not party political necessarily. Obviously, there are parties who ran certain institutions, etc. But overall, it's a really difficult, thorny issue. And frankly, in Westminster, we often spend our times doing the silly games rather than actually focusing on trying to ensure that the wheels of justice turn much quicker.
Yeah, absolutely right. James, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. James Hill, Deputy Political Editor at The Spectator. So much to talk about this morning. Katie Lamb coming next, Shadow Home Office Minister. She raised this question, of course, in Parliament some weeks ago. We'll get her take on this coming next.
I think the boycott of those two ministers by the UK is unacceptable. Israel's a democracy, a liberal democracy, fighting for security and fighting for the security of the world.
They've said some very unpleasant things, have they not?
They have. They've said idiotic, stupid things, and I'm on opposition. I do not think they're wonderful ministers by any stretch of imagination. So what? Even politicians have the right to say stupid things, but you don't boycott them for that. You don't boycott them. You don't boycott your own allies.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. 20 minutes past 7, very nearly. I'm here, of course, until 10 o'clock. It is the home of common sense. Right now, we're going to go straight to Katie Lamb, MP, Shadow Home Office Minister. Katie, very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning. It's my pleasure.
Good to see you. I mean, this is such an appalling report that I think even those of us who knew how bad this was didn't quite realise it was as bad as this. And so many sort of talking points, but many of them around who knew what and when did they know it, and why in January did so many Labour politicians and Labour cabinet members and ministers say they didn't need an inquiry?
It's totally shocking. The report is a very, very difficult read. And you're right, it's bizarre, truthfully, to me, that we had so many politicians, even after such a long time of brave people campaigning about this, people speaking out, including Labour politicians. Anne Cryer talked about this back when nobody really at that stage yet had started talking about it, that still, just a few weeks ago, it's being denied as an issue. Lucy Powell's calling it a dog whistle. Yeah. I mean, it's remarkable. It really is. And of course, even yesterday, you've highlighted this on your Twitter account. Sean Davis, Labour MP for Telford, told the House that Amber Rudd and Rishi Sunak refused to provide a statutory inquiry into grooming gangs when he actually was the one who was in charge of the council who asked them not to. And it's all documented. There is a signed letter which has also been posted online where he said, effectively, there's nothing to see here. Don't come to Telford. Yeah. There's nothing to look at. And so it's totally acceptable to change your mind. And if anything, it's a good thing. We welcome the report. We're very, very pleased that the government has accepted it. But on an issue that is so much about distrust, conspiracy, cover-up, credibility is important, and the government have said for weeks and months this is not something that needs to be investigated any further. Yeah, and that is the problem. And Baroness Casey has said that this needs to be a thorough inquiry, but it needs to be a fast inquiry. It needs to bring swift justice to the victims, but it also needs to pinpoint, surely, the people responsible for covering it up in the first place. And if it turns out that Sean Davis is one of those people, then what do you think should happen to them? Everybody who has been involved in the cover-up of these crimes should go to prison. That is the only appropriate place for them, whether that is for misconduct in public office or whether it is offences to do with obstructing the course of justice. Everybody who has perpetrated these crimes needs to be in prison, but everybody who was part of the cover-up needs to be in prison. Yes, and in terms of how that's done, I don't know that there's a clear pathway for that yet. I mean, is that down to Baroness Casey as to who heads the inquiry, how it's how it's put together, what kind of evidence they'll look at, how soon it will start, any of that? The decisions from here on out are all from the government, all for the government to make, which is again why this credibility point is so important. Because how are victims and survivors supposed to trust them when they've been saying all of the things that they've been saying? Right. But there has been an announcement of a specialist unit in the NCA and the National Crime Agency that will reopen old investigations. Yeah. My concern at the moment is the focus still seems to be very heavily on perpetrators. Yeah. There has to be a unit in the NCA that is tasked specifically with investigating officials, both elected and civil service officials, police officers, social workers, everybody who was involved in covering this up, everybody who knew and did nothing to protect these children. And there has to be, presumably, the ability for whoever is running the investigation to sort of subpoena, if you like, papers, letters, emails, WhatsApp messages, voice messages, everything. Absolutely, and this is one of the key problems that we have always pointed out with doing local inquiries that don't have statutory powers, because if you don't have a legal power to compel a witness or to compel paperwork, we saw this in Manchester, it's just going to be another part of the cover-up. It's going to be another whitewash. Yeah, and Keir Starmer has said many times that he is and was the chief prosecutor in this country. He knows from his time as head of the Crown Prosecution Service how important it is to lock up the bad guys. He's being accused, though, of not prosecuting an awful lot of these cases. It's true to say that he did prosecute some. It's true to say that he did introduce a chief prosecutor in the north of England as well, Nafar Asval, and they brought that in. But he's also accused of not going after quite a lot of these people. Do you think he has questions to answer? Yes, I do. And I think the only way that we are going to heal really and move on from, which is going to take a long time, we're not there yet, this appalling series of events, this, I think, greatest stain on our country in its modern history, is for everybody to be totally honest, to get everything out there, for everybody to show contrition, to genuinely apologise, and then we can start moving forward. But that absolutely includes the Prime Minister.
Yeah, I mean, I'm quite surprised he hasn't said anything yet. You know, he said, he announced they were going to do this inquiry, and then he flew off to Canada, and he still hasn't actually spoken, as far as we know, about this whole business.
And I think it would be really, really powerful if he were to say to victims, to survivors, I was wrong. I got this wrong. This was a bigger issue than I thought. I thought it didn't need to be investigated any further. I thought that there was a far-right bandwagon that people were jumping on. That's not right. That's not true. What you've said is true. This is a real problem. This is a real phenomenon, and we need to be honest about it with one another if our country is going to fix it.
Indeed. Katie Lamb, great to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Katie Lamb MP, Shadow Home Office Minister there, saying that Keir Starmer does have an awful lot of questions to answer, and he should come out and he should apologise. We've heard an apology from Yvette Cooper, which we'll play in a moment, but, you know, Keir Starmer hasn't said anything. Let's get a voice note from Nick.
It's absolutely disgusting. So angry about the rape scandal. The one thing that worries me is that obviously this thing will still just die out. Look at the postmasters. You know, the country are outraged. Everybody got really angry by it. Nothing's happened. You know, there are postmasters still waiting to be paid out. And I'm just worried that, again, there's going to be this outrage, quite rightly so. But again, the establishment will just bide their time and it'll all die out, and they'll just play a waiting game. They'll just drag it out as long as possible. Justice needs to be served quickly to these vile individuals, and also the people who facilitated it in the blob.
Nick, absolutely no question at all. And as Katie Lamb just said, you know, everybody has to be honest. There has to be a proper investigation with statutory powers to subpoena documents, to get hold of phone messages, to get hold of WhatsApp messages, to get hold of text messages, any kind of communication that happened between people who were responsible for this cover-up, to discover what they knew, when they knew it, and what they covered up. It's that simple. Ben's in Lincolnshire. Hi, Ben.
Morning, Mike. How you doing?
Yeah, good, sir. What can I do for you?
I'm really worried about how deep and how much of a problem this is actually going to bring out, this inquiry, or even if it'd be allowed to, because I personally feel that not all, but a huge part of the Pakistani community in the UK absolutely hate white women. They see white women, the way they dress, as decadent. My wife used to live in Southall. She was divorced with 3 kids, and she got treated with utter scorn, called a whore, called a slag daily, numerous times daily by anybody.
What, just walking down the street?
Just walking down the street in Southall, like, because she happened to be wearing a pair of shorts or a T-shirt.
Yeah.
But that whole community, or not the whole community, don't get me wrong, there are an awful lot of nice people there, but a large portion of that community view our women and the way that we dress and the way that they act as disgusting.
Yeah. Well, that's why I was saying that this should be treated, surely, as a racially motivated crime, shouldn't it?
Of course it is. Of course it's a racially motivated. They view that, if you listen to it, there's some of the stories, some videos on TikTok of basically the wives of some of these rapists, and they were calling these girls slags and whores. But it's totally cultural, and something seriously needs to change.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Ben, thank you very much indeed for that call. Morning, Mike says, NA, I'm sick to the stomach of hearing Yvette Cooper and Starmer saying, let me be clear, as soon as they do, you know the next sentence will be a lie. I watched that front bench yesterday, and it is a sham, a disgrace. All I could see was Rayner in a room with the Muslim men. She was basically begging for votes pre-election. And then Lucy Powell, nasty piece of work, and don't get me started on the face-pulling of Jess Phillips. That was awful. She needs a boot up the backside. We are doomed. They should be ashamed of themselves, but I doubt they will be. Well, let's have a look at that apology from yesterday. This is Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, saying sorry.
On behalf of this and past governments and the many public authorities who let you down, I want to reiterate an unequivocal apology for the unimaginable pain and suffering that you have suffered and the failure of our country's institutions through decades to prevent that harm and keep you safe. But words are not enough. Victims and survivors need action. The reforms I've set out today will mean the strongest action any government has taken to tackle child sexual exploitation, more police investigations, more arrests, a new inquiry, changes to the law to protect children, and a fundamental overhaul of the way organisations work to support victims and put perpetrators behind bars.
Well, she might very well be sorry, but there's been no word at all, as I said, from Sir Keir Starmer. In the past 20 hours, he's tweeted 4 times. He remembered his friend and colleague Jo Cox. It was the anniversary of her death, of course. He's also offered some advice to British nationals in Israel. He's done a picture of himself or a video of himself signing an executive order that will protect UK business, jobs and workers, he says, which is, of course, the trade deal that he's done with the United States of America. And he also said this: dodgy roads aren't just annoying, they're dangerous. That's why we're investing in Britain's bridges, flyovers and tunnels. Our plan for change will serve working people for decades to come. Anything about the biggest story on the front pages this morning? Betrayed by the state? Conspiracy of silence over a race doomed thousands of girls to abuse? Ethnicity brushed aside in grooming gang inquiries? Asylum seekers behind new grooming gang cases? Anything on that? Nothing. Apparently he may not speak about it until tomorrow. We've just heard from the Shadow Home Office Minister there, Katie Lamb, saying Keir Starmer has serious questions to answer, not just about why he decided in January that it wasn't necessary to have a national inquiry, but that back in 2010 and 2011 and 2012 and 13, when he was head of the Crown Prosecution Service, why were so few cases prosecuted by him in this particular instance? That's a question. We've got a voice note from Gary. Have we done that? Let's have it.
Morning, Mike. Morning, Peter. It's Gary from Canterbury. With the grooming gangs, can you tell us, will Sadiq Khan face more questions over the grooming gangs like he did before? Because, I mean, sitting there just basically pushing the questions aside as if he didn't know what they were talking about. Was quite annoying, to say the least. And they gave this guy a gong. You've got to be kidding me. Anyway, great show.
Gary, thank you very much indeed. Yeah, that was the time when Susan Hall, who was the leader of the Conservative group in the London Assembly, asked Sadiq Khan about whether there were any grooming gangs, as far as he knew, in London. Check it out.
I asked you this question last week and you found every which way but not to answer it. Just how many grooming gangs have we got in London?
To avoid any misunderstanding, can she define what she means by that?
Yes, if you look at what's gone on in Rotherham, where there are people taking young girls, grooming them for sex, that is what I'm talking about.
We know in London there are issues about exploitation of young people, but they're not as defined by the member in her definition of what those types of gangs are.
So are you saying we haven't got the same sort of gangs that are in Rotherham, Bradford and lots of other places in the country?
Just for your misunderstanding, what does she mean by that?
You know full well what I mean by that. It's all over the television. You know exactly what I mean by that. These gangs of people that are grooming young girls for sex. Do we actually have those in London?
I'm unclear, Chair, what is meant by the question. If you could spell it out, I can answer.
I've just spelt it out. Are you not listening? It's the sort of gangs that groom young girls at a young age for sex. Exactly how much clearer do you want me to be?
And clearly what he wanted her to say was that they were Asian or men of Pakistani origin or Pakistani men, so that he could then accuse her of racism. That's what he wanted her to do. And then he could have moved away from actually answering the question and instead accused her of being a racist, which is what's been going on in the Labour Party, I'm afraid, for the best part of the last 25 years, possibly even longer. Absolutely unbelievable stuff. Coming up, we're going to talk about what's going on in the Middle East You heard Donald Trump when he was over in Canada just before he left the G7 telling people to get out of Tehran. We've got some footage of that coming up. Sarah Pochin coming up a little bit later on in the show as well. Reform's newest MP. She'll have plenty to say about this rape gang scandal. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:36. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through, of course, until 10 o'clock. Mike, this one from Tony. Police, politicians, lawyers and the mainstream media hid the truth about rape gangs. Sawa must know some Labour Party officials are deeply implicated. And one here from Sean, who says, "Morning, Mike. I'm bloody livid. This lying Labour government have hit a new low. Not only were the establishment protecting these paedophile rapists, but don't forget the police and authorities labelled the victims as prostitutes, all this mainly in Labour-run areas." Well, I think there's going to be an awful lot of people in those Labour-run areas who are now going to be slightly shifting around uncomfortably as they realise that somebody is coming for them. Somebody is going to start investigating exactly what they knew, when they knew it, and what they covered up. And that, I'm afraid, will be a good day for everybody who's trying to figure out how this could have happened and how could it have gone on for as long as it did. Let's talk now to Asher Westrop-Evans, Middle East expert and journalist based in Tel Aviv. Just before we say anything to Asher, have a look at this. I know we might need this. Well, we don't have it yet. No. Well, let's talk to Asher now. Asher, very good morning to you.
Morning to you, Mike.
Thanks very much indeed for joining us. Donald Trump has left the G7 in the early hours of this morning, we understand, gone back to Washington, D.C., where he may be putting together a National Security Council meeting. He says that people should prepare for the immediate evacuation of Tehran amidst what's happening now. So what's the latest from where you are?
Yeah, I mean, certainly that move by Trump is an interesting one, and one I think everyone in Israel is watching closely today. You know, we've just had, I mean, in terms of latest here, mere half an hour before I came on with you now, we just had another barrage of rockets. We're all forced to run to shelters and flee. A significant barrage here, which seems to have landed, had some significant impacts, and it's looking like in the city of Herzliya, although it's still early reports, but not too far from where I'm sitting now in Tel Aviv. You know, we had multiple rocket barrages over the course of the night. Things are still at full bore, it seems. I mean, the number of rockets coming from Iran seems to be less in terms of absolute numbers. But in terms of where they're targeting, what they're hitting, it's still very, very real what's happening on the ground now, and we'll see whether Donald Trump, US President Donald Trump, is able to get some sort of talks off the ground. But at the moment, it just seems to be full bullfighting.
Yeah, absolutely. And it seems to me that an awful lot of the Iranian missiles are aimed, you know, kind of indiscriminately. That's what certainly Benjamin Netanyahu was saying yesterday. I'm told the accuracy of a lot of their missiles is not as good, perhaps, as the weaponry that the West has got and that Israel has got. So they can't really guarantee that they're not hitting domestic situations, that they're not hitting civilian targets, can they?
No, certainly not. The missiles that they are firing, these are non-maneuverable ballistic missiles, meaning that when they fire, they do aim with some degree of intent. I mean, what they're choosing to aim at is a question for the Iranian senior command, but once they've fired, it's up to the fates, the winds, the whatever, to see where they will actually land. And there have been multiple that are striking explicitly in residential areas in the heart of highly populated zones, away from any viable military targets. You know, I've had close friends and colleagues whose buildings have been struck directly by these missiles. Thankfully, Israel is well prepared. We have these system of shelters both built into buildings and also in public areas that people know to run to and flee to, because we as civilians are under direct fire here. This is not contained purely to the military targets.
No, sure. I think we've got the clip now. Let's have a look at this footage, which came in to us yesterday. It's Iranian TV being bombed during a live news broadcast. So, the news broadcast obviously very quickly interrupted, and there were scenes outside of the building on fire. A bit of breaking news for you as well, Asher. Israel's military has claimed it's killed Iran's wartime chief of staff after a sudden opportunity, in their words. They said yesterday they thought they'd killed the chief of their military intelligence as well. Is that confirmed?
I can't speak to the chief of military intelligence at this point, but I will say Ali Shadmani, yes, the IDF has confirmed that they have successfully killed him, the wartime chief of staff, after his predecessor was killed in those targeted strikes that kicked off this conflagration just a few days ago. I mean, this is a real blow to the Iranian military leadership. This is showing them that there is nowhere safe, that Israel is in complete control of the situation and has the sort of intelligence and capability that they are able to target senior military leadership in the heart of Tehran or in other parts of the country, wherever they may be hiding, whatever foxholes they may have dug. Israel is able to target them, and this will put Iran even further on the back foot, certainly for the short term and maybe even into the significant future.
Right. And I mean, what chance is there that Benjamin Netanyahu will, even if he's asked to operate a ceasefire, would he do that?
Look, Mike, I mean, the situation is this, and Israel has made its strategic goals abundantly clear. The fact is that the nuclear threat needs to be removed, that there needs to be not just a short term, not just a 5-year, 10-year cessation of enriching of uranium, but the complete dismantling of Iran's nuclear ambitions, admitting that removing all of it, none of this pretense that we're talking about a civilian program while enriching uranium well beyond levels that would ever be needed for such purposes, a complete dismantling of that. And I think that is what Israel, alongside the Trump administration, is hoping to achieve. In terms of what the Iranians are able to put on the table, are they able to be believed in saying that they would dismantle a program when they've lied for so many years about what the intent and purpose of their nuclear program is? Well, that remains to be seen, and I think that's really the issue on the table for Israel and certainly for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, whether any agreement that could be made would actually be believed by Iran. But at this stage, it's really about ensuring that they're not able to regroup, reamass, and continue the sort of mass attacks on civilian areas that we have been seeing from Iran.
Asher Westrop Evans, thank you very much indeed, talking to us from Tel Aviv there, which is still obviously, in Israel under attack right now from Iranian missiles, seemingly not quite so many as yesterday, but still raining down on the population, the civilian population. Isabel Oakeshot's coming up next. We'll talk to her about the G7. Also, Sarah Pochin, Reform's newest MP, joins us after the news at 8 o'clock. This, of course, is Talk.
No, you're totally right, and I think today is nothing short of a day of shame for the British state. I mean, I've been going through Louise Casey's report for the past hour, and it makes for one incredibly grim reading, but also for absolutely shocking reading when it comes to the systematic cover-up by local authority. She talks about, as you mentioned, ethnicity, saying that where there should have been clarity and clear identification of the overrepresentation of Asian rape gangs,
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is...
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:45. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through, of course, until 10. This is the home of common sense. David South Gloucestershire says, Mike, absolutely right. Cooper's words, everything in our power, meaning we will abide by the rules of the ECHR and the lefty lawyers. So we have a ready-made excuse for not removing these offenders. Weak, cowardly, self-interest driven and scandalous. Alan says, it can't be coincidence that sentencing guidelines are being amended to favour everyone but the white British at the same time this gang rape disgrace was being uncovered. It simply can't. I mean, so many questions, so many things need to happen and so much needs to be put together so that the fear of God is put up. Some of these cover-up merchants who existed and thought they would get away with it for years and years and years and years. And more importantly, an investigation, please, of the Prime Minister, of Keir Starmer, to know what he knew and what he did and what he covered up, if anything. We've already had Tory Shadow Home Office Minister Katie Lamb calling for him to answer some serious questions. As of now, he hasn't even mentioned the Baroness Casey report. Let's talk to Isabel Oakeshott, Talks International editor. First, though, Simon has got a voice note for us.
Morning, Mike. Simon in North Wales. Just a quick one on these rape gangs. Well, bit of a joke really. The only reason this is going ahead, this national inquiry, which everyone's been calling for a long time, is because Keir Starmer's been backed into a corner and he knows he's not got any real choice about it. The worry is how long this takes, because you can just see him dragging it out, and you know, it could be 10 years, just kicking the can down the road because he doesn't want to offend his voters. He doesn't want to lose that vote. That's what all this boils down to. You know, it's disgusting and it's so rife. There's so many people at it in all the northern towns where I'm based. It is so rife. So, yeah, great, they're doing something about it, but I don't think there'll be any actions in particular. I think they'll just drag it out and just keep saying, yes, we are working on the gangs, we are working on the gangs. Absolutely useless. Have a good day, mate.
Yeah, he hasn't even said smashing the gangs on this one yet. Simon, thanks very much indeed. Let's talk to Isabel Oakeshott. Isabel, very good morning to you.
Morning. I'm just thinking about the time frame for this inquiry. I think that there should be a significant political campaign to get the government to commit to publishing it before the next election. Because I think that your caller just there was absolutely right. Although they said about 3 years, well, that gives quite a lot of leeway, doesn't it? And the election will be in about 4 years. And I just don't trust them, not 1 inch. And just one other thing about the report. There are still people on social media who are denying the evidence in that official report that asylum seekers are linked to a number of ongoing investigations into child sex grooming gangs. And I just find it unbelievable, the levels of denial. They've not gone away. These people who will not listen to the truth are still out there.
And as Peter Blexley said to me this morning, surely if these current cases are involving people who have come here on small boats or by whatever means to claim asylum, then that makes it a state of emergency even more, surely, doesn't it? As if it wasn't already a state of emergency on our shores. You know, surely this now is a reason to stop anybody from coming in because of what they might do when they get here.
Completely. I mean, that's been the case for a long time. It's time that the establishment and the lefty hand-wringers accepted that these boats are not full of women and children, as Darren Jones, the Chief Secretary of the Treasury, ridiculously claimed last week, and nor are they all full of very nice people. There may well be some nice people on board those boats, but unfortunately, we are also importing people who do not wish us well and do not have good plans in mind. And that is just simply the case. And it is there in black and white in Louise Casey's report published yesterday.
Yeah, well, there's a fantastic spread in the Daily Mail today. I don't know whether you've seen it, of what happened yesterday on the shores just off the coast of France.
I have, yeah.
Where there are pictures of what just looks like a complete and utter free-for-all of people trying to clamber into boats. I mean, there are 2 small children that can be seen on the shoulders of a couple of people wading into the water. But to be honest, you wouldn't be surprised if they'd taken those children just to see if they could get on a boat because they've got a child with them.
Well, I mean, those people should be prosecuted for child neglect from the outset. They're putting their children in grave danger. I mean, I wonder how long it is going to be before these boats, these small inflatables, and they're not that small, become ferries. You know, the scale of this is now absolutely off the chart. We've already seen a story the last few days about a yacht being used. You know, why not scale up? You're so far from smashing the people smuggling gangs. All that's happened is that Keir Starmer's inability and refusal to do anything about this massive booming trade has actually emboldened the gangs, and the numbers are quite literally greater than ever.
It is incredible. And talk about Labour hypocrisy. I don't know if you saw Katie Lamb's tweet earlier yesterday, but she was picking up on Sean Davis, who is the Labour MP for Telford, who basically told the House yesterday that Amber Rudd, when she was Home Secretary, and Rishi Sunak refused to provide a statutory inquiry into grooming gangs in Telford. Unfortunately for Sean Davis, when he was head of the council in Telford, the Labour council, he actually wrote a letter to Amber Rudd asking her not to investigate the rape gangs. And I mean, so he's actually in the House of Commons pretending that something else happened.
And how do you not surprise me, Mike? And this is, people just hate this stuff from our politicians. You know, there's already, you know, so much scepticism about politicians and whether they're in it for the right reasons and whether they're honest. And, you know, as someone who's been in and around Westminster for so long, I still want to believe that most of our politicians are fundamentally good and decent. But when they do things like this, all it does is actually tarnish the lot of them. And it's reprehensible, it really is.
It really is. I think we've got the clip here. Have a look. So you can see him actually telling an untruth.
I want to praise and pay tribute to survivors from right across the country, and again highlight the survivors who worked in Telford alongside myself and other organisations to do that local-based review. The reason we did a local-based review was because the then Home Secretary Amber Rudd and the then local government Minister Rishi Sunak refused to provide a statutory inquiry into Telford.
Incredible. And so, you know, she's got the letter that he wrote saying, please don't investigate. Incredible. I just, you know, you're kind of speechless, aren't you? Let's talk about Starmer, because he hasn't said anything. He's been writing tweets about all manner of things, meeting Donald Trump, doing trade deals, even about dodgy roads. But he hasn't tweeted yet about this Baroness Casey report, and he has yet to speak about it. Instead, he's been lauding it up at the G7. Let's have a look at him and Donald Trump trying to handle some paper together.
We all know the great Prime Minister of the UK, and we just signed a document. This is, sorry about that. This is it.
A very important document.
Little windy out here. Give me that little. We just signed it, and it's done. And so we have our trade agreement with the European Union, and it's a fair deal for both.
Yeah, I mean, apart from the fact it's not a European Union deal, I've never seen anybody scramble so quickly to pick up the papers of the president. I mean, he's literally so desperate to get the deal done. He's like, sorry, I'm just going to pick those up for you.
My mind is playing all sorts of games here, wondering what would have happened if he just left the papers on the floor. You know, would Trump have picked them up? Absolutely not. But surely some kind of security
person, minion presumably would have come along,
scurry to pick them up. But there's Keir Starmer being the metaphoric, the proverbial puppet to the US president there. And I think it says it all really about where Britain is in relation to the US at this point, grubbing around on the floor, picking up little crumbs from the presidential table.
Yes, I think that's absolutely right, because I said this yesterday, that, you know, one of the things that I think was so embarrassing for us as a country was to not even be included in the memo from Israel to say, by the way, we're about to attack Iran. They decided they can't trust Britain anymore, so they didn't tell us, and neither did the Americans. And that's where we are. The G7 now goes on. Trump's gone back to Washington. So what's the point of it all?
I mean, we literally didn't get the memo, did we? Because our Foreign Secretary has painted his colours pretty clearly, and they're not the colours of Israel. And so the view is that he and his cabinet colleagues couldn't necessarily be trusted. As for Keir Starmer not saying anything about the grooming gangs and that historic moment yesterday, I mean, this is, after all, the Prime Minister who claimed not to really know about the Lucy Connolly case.
Yeah.
I mean, is it that he literally doesn't read the papers, that no one briefs him on the big stories of the day? Did he somehow miss it? Or was it rather that he feels an absolute idiot for yet another shrieking U-turn and is now just trying to leave it to others to pick up the piece?
Well, I think this is quite serious for him, because not only does it place his current judgment in question, because in January he was very sure, along with the rest of his cabinet, after he told them to say it, that there should never be another national inquiry because we've already had one and there's no need to do it and it will take too long, and anyway, what's the point of it all? To going all the way back to when he was head of the Crown Prosecution Service, and questions that he needs to answer about what he knew about cases which were not prosecuted, why he decided not to prosecute them. We can give him credit for prosecuting some, because he did, and that's fair enough, but there was an awful lot that he didn't, and the rate of prosecution jumped considerably after he was no longer the head of the Crime Prosecution Service.
Well, that could hardly be more serious, and he will be extremely nervous about that. And that's why I say that not only have opposition politicians got to really, really push on that, we must have the outcome of this inquiry before the next election, because these people in leadership positions, not just politicians, but right across the board, need to be held accountable. And the big worry is that so many of those who are responsible for turning a blind eye or just finding it all a little bit too awkward have actually long ago moved on into, they've retired or whatever, they're out of office. But Keir Starmer is right there at the top of the tree. And so, of all people, he must be held to account.
Yeah, I think absolutely no question at all. Isabel, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Isabel Oakeshott Talks international editor. We'll play you a clip later on in the next hour of Baroness Casey, who was interviewed yesterday. We're trying to get her on the show, of course, as well, where she actually says the word Pakistani was Tipexed out in some reports that she read. Let's take a word from Sarah, who's in London. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Mike. Great show.
Thank you. What do you want to say?
What I'd like to say is this. I watched an interview with Dominic Cummings the other day on YouTube, which was very, very enlightening. And I know it's a point that you've covered and talkTV presenters have covered. The other points I want to make are, what exactly are the governing bodies going to do, i.e. the social workers governing body? If any of their social workers are convicted of these terrible, terrible crimes, are they actually going to go against them? Are they going to retrieve their pensions, i.e. the Nolan principles of public life come to measure? Safeguarding, does it even exist? Because certainly the silence from Jeff Phillips on this is eye-opening to me. There have obviously been quite a few people, including yourselves at talkTV, who've really raised this. Rupert Lowe and, of course, the wonderful Maggie Oliver, Peter Blexley. They should be literally involved in this inquiry at a very high level. We need a really good criminal judge on this to investigate it. I mean, certainly Martin Ford, Casey, led the Shirley Oaks Children's Home investigation against Lambeth Council a year or so ago very well.
Yeah.
And I think also what is really going to happen on malfeasance? Is anyone actually going to be held to be accountable on this? I mean, malfeasance in public office is a very, very serious crime. And there is no reason why these people, if convicted in criminal court and convicted of malfeasance, should not go to prison, because they should be, because the knock-on effect on these victims is horrific. And anybody they meet and in relationships has the knock-on effect of this. These lives have been ruined because of the people in authority have done absolutely nothing to safeguard them, and that's from the very top downwards.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Fantastic conversation, Sarah. Thank you very much indeed. Great points made by Sarah. It absolutely has to be done the right way. It has to be done with a proper KC, a King's Counsel, a proper barrister or a judge who's not going to be infected with this kind of wet, woke virus that so many of them have been, who think that they can't deport people out of this country because of chicken nuggets or because of a right to the life that they want to have away from the country they come from. People who can't go back to Iran or Iraq because they sell sex toys, people who can't go back to Jamaica because they become bisexual, all of that nonsense. This is Morning Glory. We've got lots more to come. We'll see you after the news. Good evening and welcome to Plank of the Week, the one show where you do not have to be worried about judgmental people because we'll do all the judging for you. Let's just have a look at how Humphrey Useless is now spending his time.
There goes your career, mate.
Over there a bit is over towards where all the migrants come in. He's jumping there. There he goes. He goes over the bar. Hello, and unfortunately, it catches on his Johnson.
If he's Plank of the Week, he's got a sizable plank.
That's a whole different show.
Plank of the Week, Fridays at 7 on Talk.
Hi, I'm Kevin O'Sullivan, and I've...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's coming up to 3 minutes past 8. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through, of course, until 10 o'clock. A podcast will appear miraculously after that, about 10:15, of course. Sarah Pochin, Reform's newest MP, coming up in this hour. We've got lots to talk about this morning. The big headline on the front pages is, of course, summed up beautifully by The Sun this morning on the Grooming Gangs report. Betrayed by the state. Grooming gang victims were failed by cops and public officials who were both more bothered about dodging claims of racism. A devastating report yesterday laid bare how the state was in denial over the rape and abuse of white girls. This is Baroness Louise Casey's report, which, according to the Daily Mail, is a conspiracy of silence over race, dooming thousands of girls to abuse. Finally, they say, the left-wing establishment accepts the truth. And tragically, for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of those young girls, children, no less, who were raped, who were absolutely and utterly treated disgracefully, brutalised, in some cases injured within an inch of their lives, in some cases actually killed. Ethnicity brushed aside in grooming gang inquiries. It says landmark report in The Times reveals authorities used flawed data to dismiss concerns. We'll be playing you a clip of Baroness Casey talking to Sky News yesterday, in which she said the word Pakistani was actually tip-X'd out of reports. We'll have Yvette Cooper finally making an apology and admitting an over-representation of Asian and Pakistani men in these grooming scandals, these rape gangs, which nobody wanted to talk about. Sadiq Khan, of course, has said nothing. He denied and wouldn't even answer a question from Susan Hall last year when he was asked about it. Sean Davis, MP for Telford, yesterday getting up in the House of Commons and saying that they did a local inquiry in Telford because Amber Rudd from the Tory government refused to do one. It's a lie, because he was absolutely and utterly the signatory of of a letter in which Amber Rudd was asked not to investigate the rape gangs in Telford because there was basically nothing to see. Jess Phillips also says she did not turn a blind eye when clearly she did. She now says that she's got some new facts. Well, she's always had them. It's absolutely extraordinary. Let's get a voice note from Jean.
Hello, Mike. Jean from Malta here. I think Sadiq Khan and Keir Starmer should lose their knighthood over this scandal of the rape gangs. And thank you for bringing it to everyone's attention so brilliantly. Bye.
Jean, thanks very much indeed. So much hard, ill feeling, so many people very, very, very angry about all of this. And of course, they have every right to be, because this is, I kid you not, the biggest cover-up, certainly in any situation I've ever worked in, biggest cover-up in political history, in recent political history, possibly in all time. 0344 499 1000 is the number. Also, we'll be talking a bit about Keir Starmer, who still hasn't yet made any statement whatsoever about this. You know, the king of the tweets. He's put out tweets about how bad the roads are. He's put out tweets about meeting Donald Trump. He's put out tweets about all manner of things, walking around in the forest. But he hasn't tweeted about this. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. Tim, on the subject of Donald Trump dropping the papers and Starmer picking them up, that's the first time Starmer's done something useful for once, picking up Trump's papers, says Tim. Absolutely right. A good friend of mine, says Sean in Gloucester, who is a barrister, raised a very interesting point. Now that Keith Stalin has been proved to be a liar, surely there is grounds for every case he worked as a lawyer to be appealed. Well, certainly an awful lot of investigation is going to go on into what he did and when he did it and what he knew and what he then did about what he knew when he was head of the Crown Prosecution Service. Let's have a look at that clip I was mentioning earlier. Baroness Casey on Sky News last night talking about taking words out of reports.
I think that there has been a tendency of people who've been worried about the story to have been labelled as racist.
Yes, I mean, I found it in Rotherham. It was one of those moments in life where I was following through on a children's file, an archive, child in... and found the word Pakistani tipexed out. And I thought whoever did that inadvertently was giving ammunition to the English Defence League that were every week in and out campaigning and doing their stuff in that town. I think the problem is that people are worried about being called racist. In a way, they just give more ammunition to... If good people don't grasp difficult things, bad people will, and that's why we have to do it as a society.
Extraordinary. It's really, really incredible. Sarah Pochin's here, Reform UK's MP for Runcorn and Helsby. Sarah, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike. Nice to be with you.
Yeah, good to see you. This is an appalling situation. People are calling it possibly the worst cover-up in British history. I think it might be that. I'm staggered just to hear Baroness Casey there saying so casually that somebody tipexed out the word Pakistani. I mean, it's extraordinary, isn't it?
I was debating on Sunday with a Northwest Labour MP, and I was challenging him to use the word Pakistani. You know, and he was saying to me, "Why do you keep accusing, it being predominantly Pakistani men?" I said, "Because it is." Yeah. You know, and it's only people like me that are brave enough to stand up, and the other Reform MPs brave enough to stand up and say, you know, wake up and smell the coffee. Yeah. This is certainly historically. It's been very much a Pakistani grooming gang issue. Now, we know it's still going on, but more worrying in this report by Baroness Casey is the fact that she's now talking about, you know, asylum seekers also going down this, you know, heinous route of abuse of our children. Yeah. As you know, Mike, it's a big topic for me in my constituency of Runcorn and Helsby. We're housing a lot of illegal immigrants, and it's a hotbed of crime, and this is not going away. This is a current issue.
Yeah, of course. Well, when you were here in the studio a few weeks back, you told me about stories of young girls seemingly being dropped off in taxis, being picked up at all sorts of strange times of the day and night. You know, what looks on the face of it to be an active kind of grooming gang scenario.
I've got situations where people have told me that their daughters have been out just, you know, walking and have been approached by asylum seekers asking if they'd like to come and earn some money. So that's this is the start of it all. I know that there's an ongoing rape case in broad daylight of by 2 asylum seekers that have been arrested for that in my constituency, Mike. This is still happening everywhere. The biggest issue about this is that the Conservative government for 14 years were absolutely complicit in allowing this to happen, in allowing the cover-ups, and the Labour government, as we know, Keir Starmer only in January calling people like me with my views far right. And he's been forced to U-turn because of the public outrage, excuse me, on this issue. And the public, without this inquiry now, will not let this rest. And this inquiry has to be timely, and it has to call the people that have let this happen to account. Because if we don't, the lives that have been ruined by the establishment ignoring this problem, sweeping it under the carpet, will have been wasted. Those lives that have been ruined, these poor children that have been subject to this horrendous rape and abuse, it'll have been for nothing if we can't save the ones that are now live, these now live investigations. And it's only going to get worse with the people, I'm sorry to say it, coming in on these small boats. It's just this weather that we've got now. God knows how many hundreds are coming across.
Well, there are pictures in the Daily Mail today of scenes the like of which I've not seen before just off the coast of France of dozens of men in sort of up to their waist in water, clambering onto dinghies. They're coming over. We had 1,400 come over, I think, at the last count of the weekend. There'll be at least another couple of thousand. I mean, I've said this before. It's entirely feasible, but by the time we get to July 4th, the anniversary of Labour being in government for 1 year, it'll be 50,000 people that have come.
And let's face it, that Labour MP, can't think of his name, that's how relevant they are, but that Labour MP was arguing that it was women and children.
Oh, that was Darren Jones, yeah.
Thank you. How ridiculous. I mean, are the public really going to buy that kind of stuff? We can see the pictures. In the papers.
Well, let's give him the good grace to have another outing on that one, because I think people need to be reminded. This guy is quite an important figure in the Treasury. He's almost second in command to Rachel Reeves. Here's Darren Jones on the small boats.
And when you see that the majority of the people in these boats are children, babies and women who have been...
No, they're not.
I mean, even the audience were disagreeing with him. I mean, this guy couldn't get it more wrong. But in the Express this morning, Sammy Woodhouse, one of the victims, who's quite outspoken about all of it, is demanding that Keir Starmer resigns. I've just had Katie Lamb on, the Shadow Home Office Minister from the Tory party, who said that the Prime Minister has got an awful lot of questions to answer, not just for what his attitude was in January to this whole situation, but what he was doing when he was head of the Crown Prosecution Service.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Of course, we know he won't resign, but because he's not honourable enough, and they're still denying this is an issue, but he should do. There's 2 points that I'd like to mention. First of all, Lee Anderson yesterday in Parliament raised the question to the Home Secretary that Maggie Oliver should be, if not leading this investigation, should at least be included in this and be part of that investigation. She resigned in 2012, I think it was, and these issues are still going on and haven't been tackled. What an absolute disgrace. So she should be involved in this, and I know that she would be up for that. And the other point I want to make is there's been an absolute systemic failure to collect data on these, on who these perpetrators are. They haven't been recorded, as you've said, as Pakistani. It's been Tipexed out. It's absolutely shocking what has gone on by both parties, Conservative and Labour, and police need to be held to account, social workers need to be held to account, counsellors need to be held to account, these children's homes need to be held to account. I know my experience as a borough councillor, I went into children's homes. I was told, oh, well, we can't control them coming and going at night, so we just let them go out, and knowing that they were being abused. Mike, what kind of society are we living in when we're saying a children's home, well, we know isn't safe, but how awful that this is happening. It's been going on for years, and nobody is brave enough to stand up, apart from people like myself, and saying, people like Maggie Oliver, of course, but, we need real people on these committees. And how sad is it that it's taken Baroness Casey to do this report, to actually call out the Pakistani element, to call out the systemic lack of information, cover-ups that has gone on, for Keir Starmer to U-turn again and say, OK, then I'm going to have to, agree to an investigation.
Yeah.
But what's the time on it? What's the time on it? That's the other thing.
Well, exactly right. And I mean, lots of people have got sort of ideas about how that should be done and who should be appointed to run it and all of that. But my other question, which very few people are actually asking about, is how is it possible that you would worry about cohesion of a community by going into that community and arresting people committing the most vile, ghastly, horrible crimes against children? Who in that community is going to stand up for these scumbags? I mean, look at them there. Are you seriously going to tell me that Labour were worried that other members of their community would be upset if they were arrested? Because why would they be? I mean, I said this to Peter Blexley this morning. If somebody came to my street and started arresting a criminal gang that was living there and robbing everybody's cars and houses and all the rest of it, I wouldn't be standing up for the people that were doing the robbing. I'd be going to the police, in you come, take them away.
These men are misogynistic, women haters. They see white Western girls as trash, as something there to abuse. Now, this, in my opinion, is hate crime.
Yeah.
Now, why is it that people like me are called out for having far-right views when we want to get these vile individuals off the streets, and yet they clearly are considering white Western women and girls as fair game for this rape, this abuse, and yet that's not a hate crime.
Yeah.
They're not doing. Well, I don't know whether they're doing it to their own, but the point is, it's clearly a hate crime against white Western females.
Well, it's certainly a racially aggravated crime, isn't it? If you were a prosecutor, you would call for further and worse punishment because of that.
And I know from my 20 years as a magistrate, anything racially aggravated is that the sentence is vastly increased.
Right.
None of that is happening. Let's face it, they're only just being brought to court, let alone having longer sentences. Oh, and by the way, of course, this Labour government is reducing the sentence served now to a third anyway.
Right.
So these people, even if they're put into prison, will be back out on the streets.
Yeah, I mean, we've got a guy who was actually in prison for 77 years. He's in the Mail today. He was let out of prison years and years ago, and he should have been deported, but he hasn't been. And of course, he hasn't been deported because he gave up his Pakistani citizenship, so he hasn't got anywhere to go. Again, yesterday, Yvette Cooper said, we will do everything in our power to deport these people, which means they won't deport them.
They won't deport them because until, as we know, we come out of the European Court of Human Rights, that's not going to happen because they'll keep claiming that, the English chicken nuggets are nicer than Pakistani chicken nuggets or whatever the nonsense is. And we look and we're a laughing stock when it comes to our judges allowing and agreeing to that sort of nonsense. The British people will. This is why reform has such support, because the British people have had enough. And I keep saying enough is enough. They want someone now to say, we're going to stand up for ourselves. We're not putting up with this anymore. These people have to be deported. They have to be removed from the country. Personally, I wouldn't put them in our prisons because that costs the taxpayer a fortune. £55,000 a year per person in prison. They need to be deported out and placed into the Pakistani prisons or whatever they want to do with them. But they need to be moved out of this country. And I would remove their British citizenship.
Yeah, absolutely right. And thanks, but no thanks, they get lost. One final thing, it's slightly off the topic here because I know we're very much focused on this terrible report, but story in the Telegraph today, Keir Starmer's done this new deal with the European Union in which they now have some say over our food manufacturing standards. Apparently, crispy bacon crisps are now no longer going to be able to be exported to the EU until they change the bleeding recipe. How ridiculous is that?
Oh, my goodness. This closer alignment with the EU that Keir Starmer is desperate to achieve is just going to drag all this nonsense back up again. Was it something about we couldn't have wobbly carrots at one point? Yeah. And now they can't have our bacon crisps. Well, you know what? We're quite happy in this country to eat our wobbly carrots and have bacon and keep our bacon crisps. What a load of absolute nonsense. He's betraying, on a more serious point, he is betraying the Brexit vote. We know that neither the Tories or this Labour government have any intention to maximise the benefits of that Brexit vote to carry out the will of the British people. Worse than that, Keir Starmer is heading back into Europe and aligning us closer with Europe. And yet, interestingly, when I called him out on that in PMQs about aligning us with some of the safety issues that Europe are undertaking, like banning the burqa, what did he do? Refused to even answer that question. So he's quite happy to go along with bacon crisps, but he won't debate in Parliament serious issues of public safety.
No, exactly right. Great to see you, Sarah. Thank you very much indeed. Sarah Poachin there, Reform UK MP for Runcorn and Helsby. I said crispy bacon crisps. Of course, I meant smoky bacon crisps. I don't know why I said that. But there we are. Let's have a quick look at what Richard Tice had to do yesterday. He was in Parliament and he put this question to Yvette Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome this statement from the Home Secretary and that there will now be a national inquiry. Does the Home Secretary think that that will be finished within, let's say, 2 years for the British people? And given that she quite rightly apologised to the victims and survivors, will she now apologise on behalf of the Prime Minister, who smeared and labelled those of us who called for a national inquiry?
Yeah. Well, he raises the issue about the timescale for this, and the so in the discussions that we have had with Baroness Casey, and also recognising the many issues that people want to raise with an inquiry, we had expected that it might take around 3 years. And I do reiterate in my statement earlier the recognition of the huge harm that has been done to victims and survivors through decades. And I would urge him to look at that section of Louise Casey's report with the 17 pages of failure year after year after year to follow through and to take action. And I do believe that victims and survivors are owed an apology for that failure over very many years.
So, once again, she didn't actually answer the question, because the question was, will you also apologise to those people who were labelled as far right for wanting to have a national inquiry, given that now the government wants to have a national inquiry? So either, if you don't want to apologise to them, then you must be admitting that you're now far right. So do we now have a far right government? Is that what we're doing? 8:21.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 8:24. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. Of course, Rob's in the West Midlands. He says, morning, Mike. And now the rape gang inquiry has been given the go-ahead. I'm just wondering if there will be an exit watch at airports, ports and stations to capture those looking to leave the country prior to being brought to account. I suspect that some, indeed many, that can go and live somewhere else will leave the country before they can be properly exposed and appropriately dealt with. Well, that's a very good point. We've got a voice note as well from Annalise.
Hi Mike, it's Annalise from Surrey. What really struck me about that clip that you just played from Sadiq Khan is the fact that he kept saying, what does she mean by that? What does she mean? He didn't say, what do you mean? And it was really misogynistic and nasty. Terrible stuff.
Yeah, Sadiq Khan, very, very touchy when he gets asked any questions about, obviously, Pakistani rape gangs, because he himself, I believe, comes from a Pakistani background. His father came to this country from Pakistan. I don't know why he wouldn't, in some ways, castigate those people who may or may not be from his own community, who are doing terrible things to children. I don't understand why any politician would think that that was in some way a damaging piece of opportunity for people in any community. Surely if your community has people in it that are committing horrible, heinous, ghastly crimes against children, you'd want them out of your community, wouldn't you? That's what it seems to me to be like. But let's talk to Ross Clark now. He's got a big column in The Sun today. The inquiry must root out racist attitudes of those who turned a blind eye to gang rape. Ross, a very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
We've spoken this morning to a couple of guests, Sarah Pochin just now, and also to Peter Blexley this morning, because we had a call from a police officer who said that he doesn't understand why many of these crimes, well, all of them really, have not been categorised as either racially aggravated crimes or hate crimes, because they really are, aren't they?
Well, yes, I think there's a perfectly good case for doing that. From some of the attitudes that we've learned through this crisis. But, you know, I think the underlying thing is that most Britons would, I think, agree with the proposition that people who commit crimes should be prosecuted you know, according to what they've done, not on the basis of the colour of their skin, their religion or anything else. Now, it is true there are some on the far right who would like to make, you know, hay with this scandal and use it in order to get at certain communities. But, you know, on the other side, we've had for years and years and years, we had people who were consider themselves enlightened liberals, but were effectively pursuing this racist policy of excusing serious criminal wrongdoing on the basis that of somebody's colour of their skin. You know, because they were Pakistani heritage, they wanted to sort of brush the problem under the carpet, pretend it didn't exist, because they feared it would impact on their sort of glorious vision of diverse Britain and so on. And it's that latter group who are the sort of most influential, far more influential than the far right. But they cannot seem to see that they are being just as racist as those people on the far right who, you know, would want to try to, you know, exploit this for their own political purposes.
But the fact is, anybody who's accused of exploiting it for political purposes doesn't understand really what the origin of all of this was. The origin of all of this was the criminal acts themselves. You know, because it was, and indeed, as you mentioned in the piece, the first time you came across any mention of these rape gangs was when there was a potential sort of documentary designed to expose the British National Party.
Yes, this was back in about 2006. The BBC ran a panorama expose of the BNP, and part of that was sort of undercover film footage of Nick Griffin, the then leader of the BNP, talking about rape gangs, essentially. And, you know, like most people in this country, I've probably never heard of, you know, this phenomenon before of, you know, gangs of Pakistani men exploiting white working class girls. And you know, like most viewers, I suspect I thought, well, that's just being made up by the BNP to rouse racial tensions between communities, and it can't possibly be true, can it?
Right.
But, we then learned, to our horror, that it really was true.
Yeah.
And
then you found out just not just that it was true, but that it was on an industrial scale that it was going on.
On an industrial scale, far more than I think even the BNPs were sort of making out. But if you want to encourage the far right, there's no better way to do it than to try to sort of cover up this kind of thing, because what those people and agencies did by trying to cover this up was hand the initiative to the BNP and others on the far right. If been open about it to begin with, then there would have been nothing there for the far right. But I'm afraid by the huge cover up and the excuses given and the failure to prosecute on the grounds that it might inflame racial tensions, that has had a far more damaging effect in the long term.
Of course it has. And how confident are you that this inquiry will actually be properly run, will find proper targets, will go after people, and will get those people for being complicit, not just in the perpetrating of the acts, but in the cover-up itself? Because that's what a lot of people are saying to me is really important. Of course, Labour will say it's all about the victims, and yes, of course it is, but it's also about the people who covered up for those perpetrators for decades, and for people who got away with it. Not just the people who actually carried out the rapes, but for the people who didn't allow the police to investigate and prosecute them.
Well, that's absolutely right. I mean, the worst thing that could happen now is that this inquiry just concentrate on the rape gangs themselves and what they were doing, and fail to address properly the racist attitudes among police, social services, and other agencies, which failed to prosecute these gangs on the basis that it would, rifle community tensions. And it's those that should really be the focus of this inquiry. I mean, obviously what the rapists themselves have done, they belong in court. We've had court cases, we should have many more court cases, but what the inquiry itself should concentrate is on the cover-up, on how this offending was going on an industrial scale, and nobody was taking it seriously, trying to belittle it and refusing to investigate, and also blaming the victims. So one of the worst aspects of this is that the girls who were being raped were sort of, blame themselves, themselves blamed for it. So, the lifestyles they were leading, it's all their own fault for getting, that's not how child abuse should work. Our attitudes to child abuse work, and it doesn't work in any other sense. We don't blame the victims of Jimmy Savile for their own abuse, for example, and neither should we in this case.
No, absolutely not. Ross, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Ross Clark, their columnist at The Sun, with a big piece in the paper today saying how the inquiry must root out racist attitudes, and he means by that the racist attitudes of those people who are protecting the Pakistani rape gangs, particularly those who turned a blind eye to that gang rape. And as he says, it is a stain on our society, as Yvette Cooper has said, but it also is true that there are many people who were behind this cover-up who were very influential in our society. These people who tend to dominate police, constabularies, council, social services and the judiciary lack the insight to see that they are just as guilty of racism and prejudice as anybody else who's accused of being on the far right. Absolutely right. Absolutely true. While we're looking at The Sun, let's have a look at what's on their letters page today. And lots of people today in The Sun want to know about what's going on in the Middle East. One from Des in Rugby says, why would Keir Starmer feel his voice would carry any weight in the Israel-Iran conflict? Every time he gives his opinion on anything, he is humiliated. And one here from Edward in Bristol. Does anybody believe there will ever be peace in the Middle East? They will continue to attack each other until one side resorts to using a nuclear device to totally destroy the other. And just on a couple of other stories on the grooming gangs, just about every person in this country wanted a national inquiry into the grooming gang scandal, but Keir Starmer refused, says Brian in West Yorkshire. Suddenly we have another U-turn, and Starmer is spouting on and on about action. Well, yes, he is, of course, because that's what he does. You know, Captain U-turn. U-turn if you want to, as Maggie Thatcher famously said, but Keir Starmer seems to want to do it on a very, very regular basis. 0344 499 1000. Is that the sound of paper shredding, says Keith in Belfast. Supermarkets have sold out of matches and firelighters across the land. There will be a concerted effort to dispose of evidence as we speak. The information urgently needs to be protected. An absolute disgrace touching each and every dark, quiet corner of the British establishment. I think this is as big a scandal as we have ever had in this country. I think there is no doubt about that. I think it will reach into some very, very interesting places, and I think we will end up with a whole host of people being taken down by this very scandal. Many of them will be MPs, many of them will be Labour councillors, many of them will be police chiefs, and many of them will be civil servants working in social care. And the sooner we get on with that absolute clean-up operation, the better. It's 8:34.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 8:36. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through, of course, until 10 o'clock. Come on, Mike. Don't you think that the investigations into child rape gangs will give Starmer the opportunity to say he can't comment on the subject because of the ongoing investigation, just like Southport? He's got plenty of form for this, says Jim. Well, that's an interesting point, actually. I hadn't thought of that. I don't think he'll be able to get away with it this time. Surely not. That would be absolutely and utterly ridiculous. Mike, what I would like to know is why the people of Rotherham kept voting Labour, knowing full well this grooming was happening on their watch, and still kept voting them in, and have done with a majority since 1933, says Ernie. Well, I think there's probably pretty good explanations for all of that, and I dare say you'll be able to find them. By the way, a bit of breaking news. Apparently the people at Number 10 have finally agreed with everybody else. They've obviously been listening to Morning Glory again. They've admitted that the small boat crisis is getting worse. They've actually said it. They've said the words. I mean, if we suddenly had an outbreak of truth going on inside government, it's believed to be the first time Number 10 has categorically stated the small boat saga is getting worse, not better. They finally admitted it as hapless French cops are failing to stop crossings. I mentioned earlier, this is a story online in The Sun, by the way, but I mentioned earlier the Mail have got a spread of 2 pages in the paper today of pictures of people clambering onto dinghies, walking waist-high, wading out into the water, waist-high, to try and clamber onto boats and come to Britain. And so for the first time, Number 10 has now admitted that they've got a real problem here, and it's getting worse. And apparently, Number 10 said Sir Keir Starmer and Mr Emmanuel Macron over at the G7 have agreed they must find innovative ways to battle the onslaught of dinghies reaching British shores. Well, I've given them plenty of ideas on how to do that, how to deal with that. You stick a knife in them before they put them in the water, and then they don't float. It's not difficult, you know. Get on with it. There's a lot of French police there standing by watching it, for heaven's sake. Let's talk now, though, to Alan Lofthouse, who's Deputy Head of Health at Unison, because the story came across our desk just the other day. High numbers of staff are leaving emergency call centres, those people that answer those 999 calls, because of high pressure, a lack of support, verbal abuse, long shifts, low pay, and, of course, the ambulance problem, which I'm sure doesn't help. Very good morning to you, Alan.
Good morning, Mike.
Nice to talk to you. Call handlers get so stressed they took an average of 33 sick days a year between 21 and 25. That's about 5, maybe 7 times more than your average. So what's going on?
Well, we're trying to shine a light on these really difficult jobs that workers do in call centres across the country, responding to the calls from the public, from your listeners, when they need an ambulance or they want advice or they're worried about a relative. And really what we're trying to highlight is that these jobs are so pressured and there's not enough support there for staff. You think about, they take a call, they deal with some of the most difficult situations that you're ever going to face in your life. Put the phone down. The phone is ringing because it's constantly ringing because our 999 services are overwhelmed already. They pick up another call, they deal with another patient, and there's just no time between calls, no time to decompress, no time to to think and process what you've been through. And this is just leading to this incredible turnover rate of staff, where we're seeing, you think about that over 3 years, an average of nearly 30% of people, 1 in 3 people are leaving every year. And in some of them, it's 80%.
Yeah.
8 out of 10 people leaving a job. And it'll be a job that they love. It'll be a job that they really want to do because it's a really rewarding job. But it's also a really pressured job. And I think it's time to shine a light on some of these really challenging careers.
I mean, what sort of training do they get before they get to actually have to answer the calls?
Yeah, I mean, they're incredibly well trained. They go through, a whole series of weeks of training before they take calls. But what you get with a job is the training and then the experience. And of course, that experience leads you to understand the job, understand the patients you're dealing with better. So they're highly trained, highly skilled individuals. And yet their pay is only just above the national minimum wage. And that's, pay isn't everything, is it? You can't just stay in a job because of pay, and people aren't attracted to working in the NHS or the ambulance service because of pay. But when their wages are just above the national minimum wage and they can get equivalent wages in a supermarket, why would they stay in an ambulance service answering calls, being screamed at, shouted at, demanding public, and situations where they're trying to help people in, like I said, those really difficult situations. They're listening to people who are with someone who's dying or has died or traumatic, and they can't do anything to help. I'm an ex-paramedic myself. So at least when I got there at these emergencies, I could hands-on help patients. I could take them to hospital, had something to do. Some of these call handlers are taking calls from people. They're giving advice. They're telling people how to resuscitate family members or friends, but they can't do the thing themselves. They've just got to go with it. And people, of course, distressed. So, money's only one part of it. We're also calling for greater support because there is much more that can be done to give staff the support they need, to try and reduce those sick days, to try and prevent that turnover, because economically it doesn't make sense to just keep churning through your local population.
I mean, when you say support, like what is it that you're asking for then?
Well, we want better occupational health support, better counselling services. Often ambulance services, and look, we've got some really good examples. We're not here bashing ambulance employers necessarily, but we're saying, well, clearly it isn't enough, and clearly it's not quality enough. So it might just be a regular counsellor that you can phone up, the sort of thing that anyone can get in any employer. So you phone them up and you get 5 counselling sessions. And then after that, it pretty much stops. Well, you're talking people who could have some serious traumatic mental injury from the things that they might have heard or processed. So there's got to be a greater understanding that these aren't machines doing these calls.
They don't have someone they can talk to about that?
I mean, they ambulance services do have access to occupational health support, but what we're saying is the quality of that support needs to be better. It needs to be dealing with some stuff. It can't just be general counselling. Right. People can end up with things like post-traumatic stress disorder from doing these jobs. You often think it's only those people who respond in the ambulances or army personnel, but it's that thing of you're helping somebody and yet you can't physically touch them. All you can do is try and provide them advice. And you imagine giving advice to a mother on how to resuscitate their baby, and then that call line goes dead and you don't know then what's happened, and then next thing you know, you picked up a call to somebody who's abusive who wants a taxi ride home from the pub. And it's that kind of shock between those two things that creates that mental challenge for people, and what they want is support from their employer.
How much more difficult is it now that ambulances are in such short supply that you can't actually get ambulances to an awful lot of people? And people tell me all the time that they've had to wait 9 or 10 hours for an ambulance, or they haven't been able to get one at all. That must be difficult as well if you can't actually allocate an ambulance.
That's a really good point, Mike, because, you know, what the public want is an ambulance quickly to them, and that's really what they should expect. But we know that that's been declining over the last few years. You know, ambulances are queuing outside hospitals. They can't respond in the community. So that means someone there is holding risk, and that's your call handlers. That's the ambulance control centres that are holding the risk in the community. And that means people phoning up and saying, well, where's my ambulance? You know, my dad's on the floor. And they're trying to say, well, yeah, but we're dealing with a car accident. Somebody's had a cardiac arrest. We want to get to your dad, but we don't have an ambulance. And people get frustrated. People start to shout. People are abusive. And that's another thing that we're calling for. There's been quite a lot of work to make sure that the ambulance personnel who are going out there, they face a level of violence and abuse. But call handlers do as well. And often it's very difficult to say, I'm going to put the phone down on you because you're racially abusing me, you're shouting at me, you're saying sexist and horrible things to me. But that still needs to be done with those things. There needs to be some penalty for people who can't use the service, and understand that it can't be everything for everyone at all times. So, yeah, I think reducing the pressure on staff also goes to dealing with those abusive callers. And if you've ever watched any of those shows, you would have heard them, and they are regularly broadcast the kind of horrendous things that people will say to somebody down the phone. And often it's because they're worried, but also because they can't get an ambulance, and that's not the call handler's fault.
No, exactly right. Good to talk to you, Alan. Thanks very much indeed. Alan Lofthouse there, Deputy Head of Health at Unison, with some problems there with if you try and get ambulances. No wonder. We'll take some calls on that and some notes on it as well, if you wish to have a view on something like that. Morris is in Bridgend, wants to talk about the rape gangs. Morris, very good morning to you.
Morning, mate. Thanks for taking my call.
Not at all. What can I do for you?
I noticed Keir Starmer's in America at the moment, and with Trump. Do you think he might have brought this out about he's going to do something about the rape gangs, so Trump can see he's doing something and using them poor little girls as a way of getting a trade deal?
Well, I don't think it's quite as blatant as that, but I certainly think that the timing was interesting, because he didn't have to say that he could have waited till the report came out, which recommended a national inquiry, and then said he was going to do one. But he wanted to get up ahead of that to make it look as if he knew he was doing the right thing. I don't think he used it to get a trade deal, but I think he definitely didn't want to be here when the report broke, and he's not.
Yeah, you're right there, Mike. And can I just say something about that Sarah Poachin?
Yeah, go on.
That woman's absolutely fantastic.
I think she's great.
She's the next Prime Minister. Got to be. If Farage don't get in, this country needs someone like her, so the rest of the world can say Britain's back on track again.
Absolutely. Common sense, she is. All about common sense. Morris, great to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Judy in Norfolk says, morning, Mike. Love your show in the morning. Captain Flip-Flop has now reached the dizzy heights of major disaster. And what a disaster he is. Let's get a voice note from Andrew.
Oh, hello, Mike. Listening to Yvette Cooper there, it's the same old spiel. It's always the same. Lessons will be learned, we've let you down, blah, blah. I mean, this lot do more U-turns than that. I just can't take any of them seriously, Mike. Nothing will happen about this, I reckon. Like your previous caller said, it'll get investigated, then it'll just get forgotten about, and nothing will happen about it, in my opinion. I hope it does, because these poor girls and their families and stuff really do need some, resolution to this. I think it's absolutely disgraceful, I really do.
Yeah, it really is shocking, isn't it, Andrew? Thanks very much indeed for your note. This from Paul, who says, morning, Mike. Paul from Hartlepool here. On the issue of smoky bacon crisps, here is two-tier bowing down once again to the will of Europe, because he knows he's finished in this country and has aspirations of standing alongside Ursula as King of the European Commission. But did you notice the scenes at the last summit? None of the leaders wanted to talk to him and, in fact, turned their backs to him. Remember that great scene of when he went out to, I think it was Budapest, for one of the many summits that he's been to in the year that he's been Prime Minister, and he got out of a car, and everybody else that got out of a car was sort of warmly greeted by someone, and he got out of a car and there was nobody there. There was literally nobody there to shake hands with. Extraordinary. Andrew's in Fife wants to talk about the grooming gangs as well. Andrew, very good morning to you.
Very good morning to you, sir. Yeah, I'm just thinking of like you stayed in America and I did back in the 80s. Now, if somebody knows about a crime, they can get charged with conspiracy being involved with it.
Yes.
So if I wouldn't say your leader and his cronies actually knew about this all the time, why can't they get charged with conspiracy? Because they knew about it. It's your children they're raping, man.
Yeah, well, it was happening in Scotland as well. I mean, there were women, girls have been talking about being taken to Edinburgh, being taken to Glasgow. You know, it's a nationwide problem for Britain. It's not just England. So you're absolutely right. They knew about it, and we need to know what they knew, and we need to know when they knew it, and we need to know why they didn't do anything about it. And that, I think, Andrew, is the key. Thank you very much indeed. Liverpool, Jacqueline says this: Mike, I'm sorry, but we are all livid sitting here when we hear racist ammunition to the far right, etc. There is nothing far right about wanting to show quite Pakistani men were raping, branding and selling white girls. Disgraceful. Absolutely. People have had enough. People are at the end of their tether with all this stuff. Coming up, we're going to take a little trip to Royal Ascot because Templegate is here. That's the Sun's racing tipster, and he might have some tips for you. So keep your eyes peeled and have pen and paper ready, just in case, or something else to write it down on, maybe on your phone. 8:48.
These perverse scientists are working on developing nuclear weapons to destroy the Jewish state and, for that matter, the rest of the world, because Iran, that have intercontinental ballistic missiles, plus nuclear warheads. Right now, enough uranium for 10 nuclear warheads is a menace not only for Israel, but for the whole world. And I think Israel's doing the very thankless job of fighting Iran on this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham. It's coming up to very nearly 9 minutes to 9. I don't know where the time has gone this morning. It's been really, really quick, really fast. Gerald says this: earlier this morning he had a voice message from a flight instructor saying that to his certain knowledge some asylum seekers were taking flying lessons. Please don't let this slip by unnoticed. It is huge. And where are they getting the money? And why? They need to learn to fly. I'm glad I don't live in work in high-rise in London. Yeah, well, I mean, it's a very good point, Gerald. I mean, I mentioned it as we got that message. You know, I think if some of these asylum seekers learn to fly planes, we need to know what on earth is going on. This from Malcolm in Hampshire. Listening to Yvette Cooper, my blood is boiling. This government has deliberately brushed this issue to one side, having had ample opportunity to act, and would have done nothing unless forced to. This so-called apology is an insult to the victims. It's absolutely breathtaking. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Let's talk now, though, to Steve Mullen, better known as Templegate, because he's Sun Racing's top tipster. Time to head over to Royal Ascot, which has got a 12-page pull-out in the Sun today. Steve, very good morning to you.
Morning.
Good to talk to you. The King and Rye is what it says on the front of your big pull-out today. The King's got a horse, and it's called Reaching High.
Yeah, he's got a very good chance of winning as well in the 5 o'clock, the Ascot Stakes today.
Right.
Nothing better than Royal Ascot to see the King and Queen's colours carried to a winner, of course.
Yes.
He's got royalty. The Rye is Ryan Moore, who was the undisputed top British jockey of his day, the current Leicester Piggott, if you like. He's riding it, and it's got a very good chance of winning. Around about 7-2 this morning, that one is reaching high in the 5 o'clock.
Yeah, okay. I mean, quite often what a lot of people do, because it's Royal Ascot, you know, they might not bet all the time, but they'll have a little bit of a flutter on Royal Ascot. Sometimes looking for a bit of a sort of a streak, trying to put a few horses together. What's the sort of what would you be looking at if you wanted something like that today? Your trio.
Yeah, well, yeah. For 3 today, I mean, I wouldn't put anybody off the King's Horse in the 5 o'clock reaching high. But the one I really like, there's a couple I like on form. In the Queen Anne, the opening race, there's a horse called Rosalien running in that, who's won at Royal Ascot before and ran really well last time. And the ground's fast, the weather's nice, he loves fast ground. So that one, Rosalien, in the 2:30. And then the nap of the day, if you like, the best bet of the day, is a horse called Gustad, who runs in the Coventry Stakes, 305. That's Ryan Moore again. He really is the jockey to follow at Royal Ascot. He's ridden 85 winners at the meeting over the years. And a horse called Gustad in the 305, he'd be my best bet of the day.
Okay. And what's the price for that one?
He's around 4-1, 5-1, depending on which bookie you go to. So the three of those, Rosalien's about 5-2, Gustad's about 5-1, and the King's Horse is about 3-1. So what's that? 4, 10, well, that'd be about 50, 60 to 1 if they all came in.
Yeah. That's not
it's
bad.
It's a big if, of course.
Yeah, of course, it always is, isn't it? I mean, have you got any? I mean, people like me who don't bet very often. I mean, I go to the races occasionally. I'm not an expert by any means. You know, you'll sometimes pick up on a particular jockey, or you'll pick up on a name or a trainer. I mean, there's no magic formula, I know. But is there anything that you would advise people to do if they're just kind of doing it for the first time?
Yeah, I mean, if you're just looking for a bit of fun, I mean, like I say, Ryan Moore is definitely the trainer to follow, the jockey to follow, rather. Aidan O'Brien, he's by far the leading trainer as well, and you can look for his. I mean, the thing about Moore is he does tend to get on a roll, and if he rides one, he often rides 2 or 3. So it's often good if you want to pick a jockey to follow. He's definitely the man.
Okay. I also see on the front page of your pullout, the bookies are fancying the King Queen to be wearing blue. 7-4, Her Majesty has a blue tie. 5-2, Camilla's in a matching hat. But William Hill believe they may be pretty in pink too. Second favourites 5-2, and 4s for the hat.
Yeah, well, it was always a great tradition with the old Queen to bet on what colour hat she'd have on, and we're keeping it going. And yeah, you should be able to get some inside information, surely. Have a peek, see what's going on at Windsor Castle, and get your bet on before they come through the gates. You might get one over on the bookies.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. Great stuff. Good to see you, Steve. Thanks very much indeed. Steve Muller, better known as Templegate, with some little tips for you there, if you care to have a bit of a flutter on Royal Ascot, which, of course, is a great big deal this week, always right here and in the sun. Let's get a voice note from Graham.
Good morning, Mike. Sorry to bother you. It's Graham here from Wales. Why aren't these people being called paedophiles? Because that's what they are. Underage sex. If it's a white person, they're paedophiles, and it shouldn't matter what colour they are, what religion. They're just paedophiles and rapists, and they should be charged as paedophiles. And as for Starmer, he ought to pack up, leave Downing Street, and go and look for another job. Rubbish he is. Thanks, Mike. Sorry to bother you.
No, please don't be sorry to bother me. You know, don't worry. This is a show. We want to hear from you. Bother me as much as you like. And thank you very much, Graham, for the kind words. Let's talk to Peter, who's in Essex. Peter, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike. Yeah, great to talk to you.
Thank you.
The point that I wanted to make was that this issue, this whole rape gangs issue, goes even deeper, in fact, than public accountability, police, local government, etc. It strikes at the very heart of the modern state's really foundational myth of multiculturalism. And that is the basis of multiculturalism, is the basis of the left in particular's worldview, and has been for probably, 40 years.
Yeah.
Since the Labour Party gave up on the working class, they moved seamlessly from the workers are oppressed, that everybody but white men are oppressed, and all cultures are equal. Well, except one, of course, Western civilization, which is damned for all the crimes of history.
Yes.
And I think that is what they are really terrified of. That this inquiry and any talk around this is why they have to shut it down with far right bandwagons and talk.
Yeah, but that's gone now, isn't it? So what are they going to do now?
Well, this is it, and this is the problem that they've got, is that you cannot say that people from some of the most backward parts of the world can just be shipped in to a first world country and told everything that you believe in, everything that all of your cultural practices, that's fine and hunky-dory, because we live in a country, not of a community, but of communities.
Yeah.
And that is such, it's right at the heart of the left's worldview, the modern cultural Marxist, you might call it, or whatever. But they believe that the paradise, the multicultural paradise, which they'll sit on top of course, adjudicating between all the various groups and handing out the goodies and withholding the goodies as they see fit. But they see that as the new socialism almost. Yeah. Socialism is an artificial construct. Multiculturalism is an artificial construct. It is a myth.
Yeah.
No society in the world that has ever operated successfully on that basis.
Yeah.
In fact, it's only in Western Europe that we have idiot politicians who think they can...
Who think it's a great idea, I know, and they've completely ruined it for everybody. Unbelievable. Peter, listen, I've got to run. You've got knocked such a great line there, but I caught what you were saying. Absolutely right. Don't disagree with you at all. Here's one from Kevin, Southampton. Sarah Pochin has cojones. She says it as it is. Surely this inquiry will end this circus of a government and get the justice the victims need. I think so. Susan in Worthing says this. Great show today. Thank you for giving us all a chance to vent our outrage and horror at what has been allowed to happen in this country. The disgusting sick vermin in the rape gangs also preyed on and were convicted of attacking a young woman with learning disabilities. It was the deliberate targeting of the most vulnerable people in society. The depths of these people's depravity is just literally beyond comprehension. It really is. Absolutely unbelievable stuff. Coming up, we're going to speak to Kieran Mullen, Shadow Justice Minister. This is still the biggest story going on. Not least, though, don't forget Downing Street has finally come out and said, by the way, you know that thing in the Channel, you know, the small boats crisis, it's actually getting worse. Yeah, no kidding. Well, do something about it then. It's your job. For heaven's sake. This is Talk. We've been talking this morning about a new theme park which is going to be built. The Universal Studios apparently going to build in Bedfordshire. We've been asking many of you to give us some ideas for theme parks. Alison in South Wales says in the new theme park at 5 p.m. every day they could have the PIP parade. All the people driving their brand new Motability cars.
Instead of the water rapids, you can have a road you go down that's full of potholes in a car with bad suspension and flat tyres. I don't know why they're bothering building a theme park in this country. They're going right, no one will be able to afford to go to it anyway.
How about the Rachel Reeves ride, says Terry in Birmingham. You go round and round and vanish up your own deficit. It's the HS2 ride. It travels at high speed for 10 feet, where everyone gets off and into the replacement bus ride. Tickets are £50 if bought 5 months in advance, or £1,000 on the day.
There's a strong rumour going round that Rachel Reeves is going to have a kissing booth for this theme park. So what I do, mate, I shove a £5 in a pot and you can go in and fill your boots.
Thank you very much indeed, and very generous of you. One from G, who says fast-track entry to every ride for illegals, plus a free night stay in the park's hotel and free food. New theme park bumper cars will have to pay a congestion charge, and the funhouse isn't built yet, despite Angela Rayner's pledge to build houses. And what about Ghost Train doesn't move because the driver's on strike? Have a good day. This is brilliant for the theme park. How about grow your own cannabis farm? Yeah, that's a good one. An Ethiopian safari park narrated by Angela Rayner, says Gary in Durham. How about that? This sums up the Labour Party to me. The one idea they have to improve growth for the economy is to basically have a bloody big fun fair. It's the type of idea primary school children would pitch, given 10 minutes to come up with something. Well, it turns out, Matt, in Royston, that it's not even their idea. But they're now trying to claim it's their idea, even though it was actually the Tories.
They have done brilliantly on breakfast, but you know on Drive you've done brilliantly as well. Downhill slide rides surrounded by ULEZ cameras so that people are fined on exit. Love it. You could have a Birmingham-themed Whack the Rat stall. If you whack the rat, you can have your bin emptied for free. On the Labour theme park, a house of mirrors where they're all boarded up because they can't bear to look themselves in the eye.
I've got a great one for you, mate.
This is for the is this for the Universal theme park run by Labour?
Yeah, moat right around the park.
Yeah.
With loads of dinghies. Call it the Channel and say anyone who can break in, all is free.
Imagine a Scouse to say you can break into a theme park for free.
Hi, Jeremy. Hey, it's simple. You've got the Labour Ghost train.
Yeah.
Where everywhere is pitch dark.
Yes.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On your smart speaker. On your smart TV. And on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham. It is coming up to 3 minutes past 9. We are, of course, here until 10 o'clock. Julie Hartley-Brewer will be back. After she comes on, you can get the Morning Glory podcast around about 10:15 every single weekday morning. We give you 4 glorious hours of Morning Glory, and we've had some amazing calls this morning, some amazing voice notes as well, and lots of you have got much to say about this terrible scandal, which is on the front of every single newspaper, summed up best, I think, by The Sun. Betrayed by the state. Rape victims failed over race fears. The Grooming Gangs report says that victims were failed by cops and public officials, both bothered about dodging claims of racism. Baroness Louise Casey's report has blown the lid off the corruption, has blown the lid off the cover-up, and has blown the lid, quite frankly, off the left-wing establishment in this country, who have consistently tried to make out that any mention of Pakistani men raping white girls is in some way a racist construct and in some way should never be allowed to be said. It's a devastating report. It's going to go all the way through this establishment, and it's going to ring alarm bells from Rotherham down to the River Thames right here in Parliament, because there are some people in Parliament who may know more than they've ever let on about what happened in their own constituencies, in their own parliaments, in local government, in local councils, places like Rotherham, places like Telford, places like Oldham, places like Blackburn, even Manchester, Greater Manchester, Edinburgh. There were things going on. In London, of course, Sadiq Khan never answers questions about whether there's been any activity when it comes to rape gangs. He doesn't like answering those questions. The last time Susan Hall tried to ask him, in fact, he tried to goad her into making some kind of racist statement. Absolutely unbelievable stuff. Have a listen to this. This is what some of you have been saying to me this morning on Morning Glory.
It's absolutely disgusting, so angry. Justice needs to be served quickly to these vile individuals and also the people who facilitated it.
It is absolutely disgusting what they have been covering up.
We've got to push and try and get justice for these poor girls.
I think Sadiq Khan and Keir Starmer should lose their knighthood over this scandal of the rape gangs. And thank you for bringing it to everyone's attention so brilliantly.
Yes, we've got lots more to do in this final hour of the show. We're going to be speaking to Kieran Mullen, the Shadow Justice Minister. We've already had Katie Lamb, a Shadow Home Office Minister, calling for Keir Starmer to at least say something and to answer some very serious questions about what has been happening under his watch. Because let's not forget, not only did he say in January that he didn't think there needed to be a national inquiry because there was absolutely no point in doing it, not only did he do that, but he was also, of course, head of the Crown Prosecution Service, as he's often at pains to point out to us. And he was the chief prosecutor of this country when he did not prosecute quite a lot of these Asian, Pakistani grooming and rape gangs. What was he doing and why? That's the question we're asking. It's Good Morning Glory. Let's get it on. Breaking news just now on the airport front. Air India flight from Ahmedabad to London has been cancelled without any explanation given. No explanation for the cancellation so far. However, Indian English channel, language channel CNN News 18 reported the cancellation of the flight, which arrived from Delhi, was due to technical issues. It comes, of course, just a week after the UK-bound Air India flight crashed the Boeing Dreamliner in Ahmedabad Airport in Western India on Thursday, killing 229 passengers and 12 crew. We've got an amazing bit of footage, actually. Have we got that? Have a look at this. This is the footage of the remarkable scene when the one survivor, of course, walked off the plane. He was seated in sitting in seat 11A when he walked out. Have a look at this. He literally just walks out of what looks like a sort of a garden with a wall around it. It was quite extraordinary. I mean, I've never seen anything like that, really. We'll come back to that in a moment. We'll bring you updates, of course, on that Air India flight, which has been cancelled without any explanation so far, apart from just technical issues. Let's talk now, though, to Kieran Mullen, Shadow Justice Minister, who's down at Westminster for us. Kieran, very good morning to you.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Thanks very much indeed. We spoke to Casey Lamb a little bit earlier on in the show, who was very vociferous about this story today, the report which has basically come out and has more or less indicated that these young girls, these children, effectively, according to Baroness Louise Casey, were betrayed by the state. Keir Starmer has yet to be heard on this. She said he's got a lot of questions to answer. Do you agree?
She's absolutely right. And Kate has been doing an excellent job in Parliament of giving a voice to these girls, talking about the absolutely horrific abuse that some of these girls have been through. We're talking about very young teenage girls subjected to repeated rape by sometimes hundreds of men over many years. Absolutely horrific stuff. And of course, Keir Starmer hasn't just not ordered an inquiry for 6 months, he's criticised those of us in politics who said there should be an independent inquiry. Yeah. He said for politicians to call for one was jumping on a far-right bandwagon. That's totally wrong, and I think he does have to explain and account for that behaviour, not least because actually the Casey report, and as you've been talking about, talks about the fact that for too long anyone who's wanted to talk about the ethnic element of grooming gangs, the fact that we do have overrepresentation, at least in some areas, of men of British Pakistani origin, has been criticised for doing that. Conservative politicians, even Labour politicians, have been criticised for that, and I feel slightly like Keir Starmer's calling those wanting an inquiry, criticising them, is building on that wrong-minded approach to how we talk about this issue.
Yes, indeed. Let's have a look at what Yvette Cooper had to say yesterday, finally admitting that there is an overrepresentation of Asian and Pakistani men in these gangs.
On behalf of this and past governments and the many public authorities who let you down, I want to reiterate an unequivocal apology for the unimaginable pain and suffering that you have suffered and the failure of our country's institutions through decades to prevent that harm and keep you safe. They identify clear evidence of overrepresentation among suspects of Asian and Pakistani heritage men, and she refers to examples of organisations avoiding the topic altogether for fear of appearing racist or raising community tensions. These findings are deeply disturbing, but most disturbing of all, as Baroness Casey makes clear, is the fact that too many of these findings are not new.
And that is part of the problem. They're not new. An awful lot was known by an awful lot of people. How confident are you, Kieran, in the new inquiry that is now going to be launched, actually getting to the heart of what happened here?
Well, I'm afraid we're still lacking in core details of how this inquiry is going to operate. What we called for was an inquiry that would have power to compel witnesses, for them to give evidence under oath to get the evidence it needed. Because, of course, the idea that a local authority that may well be right in the firing line when it comes to these accusations is going to offer itself up for investigation was never going to work. So, in principle, we've agreed that this is the right way to do things, but the government hasn't yet explained how this national inquiry is going to ensure that the local investigations are done properly, that everything that we need to learn across the whole country, in fact, is going to be learned. We don't yet know, are they going to go everywhere where there are suspicions of this behaviour going on? Too many unanswered questions, and I think the Labour Party spent too long yesterday trying to claim credit for something that they actually never wanted to do and that we and others pressed them into doing, rather than giving us the details of exactly how this inquiry is going to operate.
Yes, exactly right, because only, just as I say, 6 months ago, they were all very clear. It wasn't just Keir Starmer, it was Yvette Cooper, it was Wes Streeting, every single, cabinet member you could find, all said, oh, we don't need a new inquiry because we already had one. Suddenly there's a change of heart. I think that Keir Starmer asked Baroness Casey to look into it in the hopes that she would come back and say, there's no need for an inquiry.
Well, not just at what they said. Actually, in 3 times, Labour MPs have voted against our efforts to bring about an inquiry, and they've done that enthusiastically, and so I think that a lot of them have got some explaining to do. And this issue of criticising people goes back many, many years. I remember when Sajid Javid, as Home Secretary, started talking about the ethnic element to this behaviour, and the now Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, said he was bringing the Home Office into disrepute for doing that. And even Labour MPs, for example, Sarah Champion, one of the Labour MPs, who was essentially hounded out of the shadow ministerial role because she had wanted to say something about the fact that there was an ethnic element to this. Now, of course, the vast majority of people in this country, from whatever background, are law-abiding and are abhorred by these crimes, and people from all different backgrounds are responsible for them. But we shouldn't ignore the fact that there are clearly signs that, at least in some areas, that there is an ethnic element to this offending. And if you don't accept that, you don't understand it, and therefore you can't take the right steps to try and tackle it.
And we also know from this report that's come out, something that we've been saying for quite a long time, asylum seekers are now behind a new grooming gang case situation where many foreign nationals are involved in a significant proportion of live police investigations into child sex grooming gangs, or rape gangs as some prefer to call them. The bottom line is, the government's come out today to say that the situation in the Channel is getting worse. Illegal migration is ramping up as the weather gets better this week. We could have another couple of thousand coming, with 1,400 coming at the weekend. But knowing now that many of those coming here are involved in grooming children, surely that makes this even more of an emergency to stop them.
One of the reasons I fully supported our plan under the previous Conservative government to ensure that everyone who comes here illegally is not allowed to stay here and is sent to a third country. We proposed Rwanda, but actually I think anywhere really that isn't the UK will act as a deterrent for people, is that we don't know who these people are all the time, or very often. They destroy their documents. We're not able to know whether they have criminal records, whether they're wanted in other countries, and actually Labour promised a lot on this when they're in opposition, and everything on that front is getting worse. There are more and more crossings. They're reaching record highs. They promised to get rid of the hotel use. It's ballooning. They're budgeting billions of pounds of future spending on that in coming years. Across the board, Labour made a lot of promises in opposition, and again they're failing to deliver.
Yeah, they really are. Good to talk to you. Kieran Mullen, thank you very much indeed. Shadow Justice Minister there with his take on what is going on. John says this, Mike, John from Devon, if it's proved that there are rape gangs in London, surely Sadiq Khan has turned a blind eye to what's going on in London and can be added to the inquiry. Yeah, I don't think that's an unreasonable thing to say. Morning, Mike, says Amy in the West Midlands. Starmer should lose his knighthood. Absolutely. He got it for presiding over this scandal, just as Khan should lose his, presiding over totally destroying London. Well, I don't think you'll get much argument from that. Steve from Yorkshire says, great stuff coming from your show today, as usual. Vetted Cooker sounded very serious when she apologised yesterday, and this is the same party that said we did not need an inquiry. Labour are history after this. I think it's a massive, massive moment for this Labour government. I've been saying for a very long time, something will happen to this government. Something will be so big, so scandalous, that it will bring them down. And I think this could well be the beginning of that process. Let's talk to Emma Trimble, writer, broadcaster and presenter right here, right now. Emma, very good morning to you.
Good to be with you, Mike.
Nice to see you. This is such a scandal that I think, I don't say I fear, because I don't fear it. I think this could bring Starmer down. It could bring Yvette Cooper down. It could bring them all down, because what on earth did they know and what on earth did they do about it?
Absolutely, Mike. I mean, I think it's quite clear that the Labour Party did not want to have this inquiry. They're only doing it now because they've been forced. They've been forced by political pressure, public pressure, and now ultimately they've been pushed over the edge by Louise Casey's review. They don't want to do this. I think they know very well that this is going to find all sorts of horrific things have been going on at Labour-run councils. Yeah. But I think ultimately what needs to be done is the entire political class need to take responsibility for this, because while there are individual Conservatives who have tried to do something good for the victims while in government, this has been going on for so long now. I mean, even Maggie Oliver herself, who was the original police whistleblower on this, who's been helping girls through her foundation now for well over a decade, she has pointed out that the stuff that's contained in Louise Casey's report, and I'm not criticising Louise Casey, of course, because I think it's fantastic that she's actually listened to victims and that she's done this, and that she's said, actually in some ways said the same again that she said said 10 years ago. Maggie Oliver has been banging this drum, as many others have, exposing the fact, and importantly, that these are also racially, and there is evidence suggesting these are racially and religiously aggravated sex offences. We've known this for a really long time, and this is just it's just a fact that the victims have been reliving the things that have happened to them in an attempt to get justice, to no avail. There haven't been the prosecutions that there should have been. Yes, an inquiry is good, but what we need to see is justice, and justice for those victims whose lives have been completely ruined by, some of these girls have actually got criminal convictions because of stuff that they were prosecuted for, while they were being groomed by these people. So I think that this is something that the entire political class needs to take responsibility for. Unfortunately, I don't think that the Labour Party are going to want to do that.
I think they're going to try their very damnedest to try and avoid being in any way connected to anything that happened in the past. But I mean, we've already got one example. I think it's Sean Davis, who's the MP for Telford. He got up yesterday in Parliament. Just have a look at his question here.
I want to praise and pay tribute to survivors from right across the country, and again highlight the survivors who worked in Telford alongside myself and other organisations to do that local-based review. The reason we did a local-based review was because the then Home Secretary Amber Rudd and the then local government Minister Rishi Sunak refused to provide a statutory inquiry into Telford.
Yeah, which is all very well for Sean Davis to say. Unfortunately for him, though, according to Katie Lamb, he was actually the leader of Telford Council at the time, and he wrote to Amber Rudd, and she's got the letter signed by him in which he asked her not to investigate.
Well, quite. And another horrendous aspect of this is that so many people who are in positions of authority, whether in social services, in the police, in local councils, not only have they not been held to account, and frankly, I think that there should be prosecutions, not only have they not been held to account, but some of them have been promoted. Yeah. And so victims have had to see those who were responsible, because, of course, many of these girls were in care. They were in the care of the state, and it was actually because they were in the care of the state that they were more vulnerable, that social workers just were, they were aware of what was going on to these girls and viewed them as child prostitutes. So people in positions of authority need to be held to account for this, and they need to be prosecuted. Right. I think that this is something that goes all the way to the top when it comes to the attitude of cover-up. The reality is that the reason for this cover-up is not just political, it's cultural. It goes to the very heart of the dark heart of multiculturalism, which is that they didn't want to deal with these issues because they were concerned about community tensions, and we need to get over that. And hopefully this will be a watershed moment. But I think that, as many of the victims have themselves said, they don't feel particularly optimistic because they've been here before. Right. And it hasn't amounted to much at all.
But I've always said, and I said it several times this morning, I'll say it again, what sort of community doesn't want to have its own ghastly, horrible, cruel, vile criminals rooted out and taken away from it? Which community would be outraged if police came in to take away men who were raping children out of that community? And how would they see that in some way as an attack on their community? This is the bit I don't get, which nobody really wants to talk about and nobody will explain.
Absolutely, and that's another question of accountability, because who else in these communities knew that this was happening? I mean, this is on such a scale that it's highly unlikely that there wouldn't be people in those communities. What about the wives of these men? Were they aware? Were they not able to?
I think they were.
It has been raised that maybe they couldn't communicate with the authorities because perhaps their English wasn't sufficient. Maybe there are community pressures that are preventing people from being able to go to the authorities. And again, this is a problem of integration. So this really is wrapped up in like I say, the dark heart of multiculturalism, which is that in the name of community cohesion and anti-racism and in the avoidance of Islamophobia, we've effectively for well over a decade been throwing our children to the wolves. You pointed out in your previous interview there, Mike, the fact that many of these new cases, as Louise Casey has pointed out, are foreign nationals, people who have come here as asylum seekers. I mean, the scale of this scandal is barely comprehensible. I mean, it is so profoundly evil and such an unbelievable betrayal. And that's why I say the entire political class needs to take responsibility for it.
And what about Keir Starmer? You know, he still hasn't said anything about it. You know, we're monitoring his Twitter account because he talks an awful lot about all sorts of things, including yesterday a tweet about the state of our dodgy roads. But yet nothing on the Casey report, which he commissioned.
Well, I mean, it is really quite remarkable that the ability of this government to turn its face away and stick its head in the sand. You would think that Keir Starmer would at least recognise that this is an optics issue, especially given his current, you know, popularity ratings are really through the floor. Struggling in those seats that they took from the Conservatives in the Red Wall, in areas where these grooming gangs were operating. You would think at least he would have the political nous, but I wonder whether, you know, if I was being truly cynical, you have to wonder whether it's just that he's trying to save face with his dinner party chums, his international lawyer friends.
Yeah, who all think that, you know, everything British is bad and everything foreign is good. And I mean, see, you know, that he's over at the G7 there, having really no impact whatsoever on anything. Donald Trump's already left the G7 because he wants to sort out the Middle East. And so it leaves the rest of them all sort of standing there holding the baby, wondering, you know, what are we all doing here? Starmer should be surely back here answering questions about this in the House. He should be answering questions about it in a special select committee meeting. And I think we need to know what he knew when he was Director of Public Prosecutions and why, when he left as Director of Public Prosecutions, the number of convictions and prosecutions of these rape gangs more than doubled.
Well, I mean, the complicity in this from the Labour Party, as well as I just pointed out, the fact that Louise Casey's pointed out that there are foreign nationals involved in the current ongoing grooming gang scandal, and you know, this is not something in the past. That's one of the arguments that often gets. This is something that happened a decade ago. No, it's ongoing, and that's one of the reasons why it's so important to have this inquiry, to be able to understand what exactly is going on, and to be able to actually have the data so that people in positions of authority can't just fudge the numbers and claim that actually there is no racially or religiously aggravated element to this, which is what they have been doing. They will claim that, as you know, various Labour figures have, that it's a far-right bandwagon, that it's a dog whistle, to point to the specificity of these cases being Pakistani, specifically Muslim perpetrators. I think the fact that the Labour Party, you know, have been repeatedly lobbying and voting for more open border policies, Keir Starmer and his international lawyer chums are the ultimate example of that. You know, that is putting girls and women in this country at risk. So yeah, I think that Keir Starmer, you know, in the most fundamental way possible, I'm sure that he feels like he's sort of being forced to bleed by having to accept this inquiry. But you know, maybe he's just too busy out there at the G7 picking up Donald Trump's paperwork to actually bother addressing the British public over something that is of such unbelievable national significance and importance.
Yeah, I think just from the audience reaction today, he ought to take some notice. Emma, great to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Emma Trimble, Brighton broadcaster and presenter there. A little breaking news for you this morning. Television personality Kim Woodburn, who rose to fame presenting How Clean Is Your House, has died, aged 83, following a short illness. That's a Sun exclusive story right now. Television personality Kim Woodburn died at the age of 83. Let's get a voice note from Dale.
Hi Mike, Dale from Cambridge here. Just heard the other voice note from that other gentleman about saying how Keir Starmer needs to find another job. Well, I've got an idea. He's great. He'll be great as a PA to Donald Trump, because I tell you what, when those papers of the deal just went flying down by his feet, it was most poetic and metaphoric. It really just, and just seeing Keir trying to scurry, picking them up for Donald Trump, it was just absolutely brilliant. So yeah, he'd be a great PA to the President of the United States, I think.
Yeah, absolutely right. What a plank. Hi, Mike, says Dan from Tunbridge. Sean Davis, MP for Telford, should be immediately deselected for blatantly lying in the House. Disgusting. And one here from Paul in Leeds. Hang on a minute. Have IQ suddenly dropped here, giving asylum seekers flying lessons after 9/11? This has to be fake news. Nobody would be this stupid, would they? Well, this is Britain we're talking about here. Coming up, we're going to hear from a victim of some of the terrible things that happened in Barrow. She's going to talk to us coming up next, right here on Talk.
You can't try and snipe at the Conservatives for things that weren't our fault.
Oh, I mean, I haven't got time. So tell your big mate Donald Trump to tell his big mate Vladimir Putin to stop killing people, then we can solve that problem like that. Are you going to be a net contributor to our society? But are you going to better the lives of the people already here?
Won't be surprised to know I disagree.
Why? Why do you disagree, though? Why do you want our young people left on the scrap heap? The court's time being wasted, laying down a ruling on what is a woman.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's coming up to very nearly 9:30. We're going to speak now to Ellie Reynolds. Ellie, who is from Barrow. She identified one of the 3 convicted brothers as her alleged abuser 6 years ago. Her case never made it to court, and instead the authorities tried to prosecute her. Incredible. So she's now waived her right to anonymity to tell her story publicly, and she's also pushed for a national inquiry. Ellie, a very good morning to you. Thanks very much for waiting. I'm sorry to keep you waiting there. This is a terrible story. Tell us what happened. Why did they decide to prosecute you instead of the man and the men who attacked you and assaulted you?
I think the short answer to that is that I was an easy target. They had pretty much no work to do when they were criminalising the victims of this rather than the actual organised gangs that were going around abusing young girls. I was subjected to 5 years of horrific crimes, child sexual exploitation, human trafficking, modern-day slavery. I was drugged. I was held in flats for days. I was multiple gang raped, more times than I could ever count. 5 years of hell to get out of it. I never thought I was going to make it out. For the police to then... Well, I went to the police thinking, you know, as any person would, thinking, oh, you know, they're going to help. They're there to protect me. I'm doing the right thing. And I very quickly learnt within a 24-hour period that they were doing anything to shut me down.
Right.
They went as silly as arresting me for offences that I'd never even heard of. I was really naive.
Right.
To as stupid as fining me for no seatbelt or accusing me of just very minor crimes as well. So there was it was years of just pretty much picking to shut me up and silence me.
And how old were you when this all started then?
I was 13 when it started. And that was 2013, and I was 2018 when I got out of it.
Right.
So a long time.
That's extraordinary. And what sorts of things did they say to you? I mean, did they try to kind of convince you that either it wasn't happening or that you would somehow given your consent to it? What were they saying?
Yeah, so there was a couple of times in particular that I really remember, and I was taken to a flat, and the police had been called, and the police had took me out of the flat. And when they came up, instead of asking me, you know, the questions of why are you here with a lot of grown men, or are you safe, it was provoking me until I lashed out, and then they arrested me. It was that I was consenting, I was trouble, I had a rough childhood, which was not the case at all. I was doing it to myself. I was putting myself at risk for exploitation because I was hanging around with older guys. Pure and utter victim blaming.
And so did you ever see a female police officer at any time during these kind of conversations?
I did, yeah.
So they were saying all that as well?
Yeah, surprisingly, the females you'd think would, you know, without being sexist, you'd think they'd have a little bit more compassion, a little bit more maternal side to them.
Right.
The females are probably just as bad. So there was a female that stood out that had said, no, I think you're just attention seeking, I think you need a little bit of help.
Yeah.
It was actually a female police officer that took my first initial statement when I reported the whole thing. She wasn't interested. Funnily enough, there was one police officer on the force that was begging the police force for help in my case, saying it's too big, I really need some help. And we've got that on video because another police officer had told us. He was a male and he was lovely. He went against pretty much everything to try and get that conviction, and he was shut down by not only the police force but the CPS as well.
Wow. And what about the three convicted brothers? These men that you accused of abusing you. Where are they?
So I only had run-ins with one of the convicted. The rest of my abusers are still roaming the streets, living life like they're somewhat normal.
Right. Do you still see them?
I haven't lately, but they are back and forth in my town, and my town's a very, very small place. So you always do have that risk of going out and bumping into people that have done something to you. Right. I do not go out on my own. I've always got somebody with me for that reason. But the majority of them, I think in any case as well, are still roaming the streets.
Yeah. And do you worry about ever seeing them, if you do?
Yeah, I mean, when you've gone through 5 years of hell, you come out really suffering, and I did develop complex PTSD from it. So if I'm not worried about going out and seeing them, you're barely getting a good night's sleep because you're having nightmares. It's constantly, whereas people think, you know, 5 years and then she's come out of it and she's really happy. I am really happy, but what they need to remember is that it's a lifelong effect. It doesn't just take its course for 5 years and then you forget about it. It's the rest of your life that's then altered and shifted, and you know you're a changed person after that, and that's what's a shame.
And you've done terribly well to decide to come out of anonymity and talk about this. I mean, you said you wanted to have a national inquiry. Obviously, it's good now that Keir Starmer has had one. But have you got a message for him? Because he hasn't even spoken since it's been announced that this is what's been going on. He's gone over to Canada. He hasn't said anything. He hasn't acknowledged that the report's coming out, that there's going to be there is going to be an inquiry. He hasn't set the terms for that inquiry. You got a message for him?
I think, as I was saying to Kev last night, I strongly believe that my toddler could run the country better. I believe that he's burying his head. He's crumbled under pressure, and I honestly believe that he's not said a word because they're going to look like clowns when it comes out how corrupt and how deep in with it these sort of people are. They know about it. They can't sit there and say we've been unaware. You know about it. You haven't done anything. You need to be holding people to account, and that's not just the perpetrators. That's people from police forces, children's services, schools. If everybody put their heads together and worked together, we wouldn't have this big of a problem. But as I always say, I feel like it'd be strongly different if it was a police officer's daughter, or if it was a children's service worker, if it was their child. It's always because it's somebody else's child. It doesn't matter, and it should not be like that. We really are a country that should be fighting together. It does not matter what the circumstances are. If you have touched a child, we should all be coming together to get that child justice and to get our country justice as well. People years and years ago did not fight for the country to look like the mess it is today.
No, you're absolutely right. It's a shocking state of affairs. So you would hope then that they will contact you at some point, the people running the inquiry, to hear your story.
I'm hoping so. I'm looking forward to it if they do. I'd be the first to stand up and advocate for not only myself but for many other people as well. So I'm hoping so.
Okay. Well, Ellie, listen, I really appreciate you talking to us, and thank you so much, and good luck with everything. Ellie Reynolds there, a grooming gang victim who was attacked over 5 years, as you just heard her, gang raped multiple times, so much that she doesn't even remember exactly how bad it was. She's waived her right to anonymity, and she's talking about it. She wants Keir Starmer to do something. She wants Keir Starmer to speak about it at the very least, and she certainly wants people who are corrupt, that she knows, to be held to account. And that is the very least of what Keir Starmer should be doing, and that at the very least should be what he's promising to do and talking about right now, today, this very moment. But he isn't, because he doesn't have the cojones to do it, I guess. It's 9:38.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 9:40. I'm Mike Graham, with you for about another 20 minutes. Julie Hartley-Brewer taking over from 10 o'clock, of course, taking all the way through the day. We wonder whether during that period of time, that period of 3 hours, Keir Starmer will actually come out and say anything at all about the report that is on the front page of every single newspaper this morning, Baroness Louise Casey's report, which he commissioned, which he has yet to say anything about. Aside from that, we've got a bit of breaking news for you on what can only be described as our broken borders. Yes, indeed. The government, in the form of the number 10 Downing Street, have come out and actually said that the small boat crisis is getting worse. Yes, they've actually admitted it. Downing Street has finally said that the crisis is increasing. This is as we look at pictures in the papers this morning of more and more young men marauding themselves into the water, going waist deep into the water off the coast of northern France, clambering into dinghies and sailing across here. 1,400 people came in a few days over the weekend. We expect that by the end of this week there'll be about another 2,000. I wouldn't be at all surprised. We have more than 1,000 a day coming at certain points if it's very calm. So I've been predicting, and I don't know how far off it's going to be, that by the time we get to July, particularly July the 4th, which is the one-year anniversary, of course, of this Labour government, there could be 50,000 that have come. There's pretty much 40,000 now, so it needs to be 10,000 over the next 2 weeks. It could easily happen. You know that I'm talking sense. Mike, I can't believe what's happening to this country, says John from Bakewell. I can't believe that abortion up to birth is even being considered and that there will be a vote on this tomorrow. Yeah, there is going to be that conversation. We'll get into that tomorrow probably. Julie says, why can't we just have police inquiries, arrest and charge in jail? Historic and present, we have names of the victims and the alleged perpetrators. Absolutely right. Max says, it's a pity the people can't have a vote of no confidence in this Labour government. Yeah, it really is, isn't it? Let's talk to Rupert Bell, because he is down at Royal Ascot. He talks royal correspondent, and every so often the royal family and the races collide. And there we get Rupert Bell dressed remarkably well in a beautiful top hat. Rupert, very good to see you.
Good morning to you. Is that the right way to do it?
That's
Doff
very
my
good.
cap to you, you know, as you are the king of talk. So I suppose I'd better doff my cap to you, metaphorically speaking.
Indeed.
But yes, but lovely to be at Royal Ascot. Love this meeting from a racing point of view. It's got obviously the history. It's 200 years since they first had the royal procession here, and it basically, if you look at it, it hasn't really changed. And the king is expected to be here for all 5 days, along with the Queen. They might even have a winner today in the 5 o'clock with Reaching High. That's a horse trained over in Ireland by Willie Mullins, which is an interesting departure for a monarch to have a horse trained over in Ireland. But Willie Mullins is one of the greatest trainers of all time, particularly of jump racing. But here at Ascot, he might saddle a winner for the king. And so it's very much part of the sort of sporting calendar, our sort of sporting summer here with obviously Wimbledon and all other high-profile events. But there is something very British and unique about this royal meeting, which means actually the crowds are going to be as good as ever. When we think we're in a sort of economic straitened times, there is something magnetic about Royal Ascot that draws people, even if you don't know about racing, the chance to dress up. And I hope I haven't let the side down. I'm a bit worried about my collar. My collar stiffeners aren't that good. I'm just having a look at them. So I need to sharpen that up if I talk to you tomorrow.
Yes.
So I'm giving myself only an 8 out of 10 with my dress effort.
Well, I'd also expect a different coloured waistcoat every day, presumably as well. Would you?
I've got that for you, Mike. If you should need me on a regular basis during this week, so I won't let you down on that front.
Excellent.
I've got plenty of them.
And I'm reading in the Sun today that Charles has sort of revivified, if you like, his interest in horses, because obviously the Queen, his mother, the Queen, was a fabulous regular race goer, and she was absolutely always energised when she went to Royal Ascot, wasn't she?
Horses were her hobby, her passion, her diversion. Where the King always used to say, I don't want to rain on, if you pardon the pun, on his mother's racing parade, because it was her show.
Yeah.
But the Queen, the current Queen, she does love racing. And remember, back in the day, the King actually rode in races, jump races, and so he knows enough. But as I say, his passion is not obviously going to run as deep as his mother's, but there's no two ways. He has owned a royal winner, and that really ignited his enthusiasm. Desert Hero was that horse 2 years ago. And as I say, he could have another one later on this afternoon.
Well, we'll look forward to all of that. Meanwhile, without wishing to rain on your parade, I'm going to have to mention that ghastly woman, Meghan Markle, who apparently has come out and broken her silence, is what we're being told, on that viral clip of her twerking while she was in labour. And I feel sort of slightly traitorous even mentioning her name to you as you stand there near the royal enclosure. But, you know, what can you tell me?
Well, another podcast. She permanently breaks her silence. She cannot be out of the news. It's a insatiable desire to be the centre of attention. And that twerking video was the ultimate sort of manifestation of that. And now she's justifying it and saying, it's what I did 4 years ago. And because I wasn't allowed to do much on Instagram, this is me showing the real me. Well, this real me currently has lost 6 members of staff. She has announced that she's going to be bringing out new products on June the 30th on our As Ever brand, that, as she describes as that the people will love. Well, they sold out so quickly, but we have no idea how much they sold. And so there's going to be new products, but she's permanently doing podcasts now. She's obviously had her own series, but by pulling in people to do a podcast with, she is able to reflect the real me, which is basically, you know, just another narcissistic delve into her own personality. But I mean, it's almost, she cannot be more than a day, because obviously there's been a lot of focus on the Prince and Princess of Wales recently, and we saw Father's Day pictures of the children of the Prince and Princess of Wales. But yes, there's been Instagram pictures of Harry larking with his children, but it's carefully managed, so we don't actually really see the children. Whereas I know that they're absolutely right, protect children's privacy, but the Prince and Princess of Wales say, right, there are certain times when we will put pictures out of them. We saw them at the King's birthday parade, the Trooping the Colour the other day, so it's sort of controlled, and that's fine. But with the Harry one and the Meghan one, it's all about this element of mystery and sort of look how much fun we're having with the children, but we don't really see them. And I understand children's privacy is paramount, but this sort of, it's a sort of strange way of going about it, that they put all these videos, and you just feel, is there a possibility in the end that they might be saying, you know, end up dressing their children in whatever brand they may want to flog or something? And I hope that never comes to pass. But I just do feel it's, you know, and always we see Meghan as the sort of center of attention, not the children. And it's a very bizarre thing. But anyway, you probably weren't expecting me to say it was the most wonderful thing that ever happened.
I wasn't really, no. In fact, I wasn't expecting you to bang on about it for so long, to be honest. But I mean...
Oh, sorry.
No, it's fine.
You started, so I finished.
No, I know. But I was going to play the clip, but you've already done it. Let me play the clip.
Did you see my baby mama dance? I mean, stop it. First of all, can I just tell you, the timing of that, we maybe watched it like 20 times yesterday, and I was like, is that her? Oh my God. Is that Prince Harry there with the fingers and the... I was like, okay. Yeah. Okay.
But also, by the way, that wasn't yesterday. No, that was 4 years ago. So it's also a really great reminder that with all the noise or whatever people do, there's still a whole life, a real, authentic, fun life that's happening behind the scenes. I'm just grateful that now, being back on social as well, I have a place where I can share it on my own terms.
Yeah. Oh, it's so great. It's so authentic, isn't it?
I thought I'd done enough talking for you not have to play it, but obviously your team behind you were insistent that we had to.
I'm sorry.
Inflicted.
I'm going to ask you, I mean, I have to say, the last time I asked you for a tip, I did take your advice and take the tip from your colleague, who actually made me win the Grand National, which was great. Yeah. Have you got one for today for anyone?
Well, Lizzie Kelly's not with me at the moment, so I can't pass on hers, but I'm going to suggest a little each-way selection in the 340, which will be live across the TalkSport network, and it will be... Starlust, each way in the King Charles III Stakes, a sprint race at 340. That is my Bell's banker today.
Brilliant. Fantastic stuff. Well, we'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Rupert, thank you very much indeed. Enjoy the day. Of course, you'll be working very hard as well. And the hat tipping is spectacular. Pretty well done. Let's get a voice note here from Gaz.
Mike, great show, mate. Gaz from Pontefract. Starmer, yeah, he only ever appears to do the right thing or appear to do the right thing when he's boxed in or backed right into a corner and he'll have to U-turn. The guy is so arrogant that he thinks he can just do whatever he wants and make any decision he wants, and, you know, he's the boss, blah, blah, blah. But I think he's finding out to his peril that he can't, because people are sick and tired and fed up, and we've been conditioned, you know, to put up with stuff. With the Tories, 14 years of Tories and everything, and people have gradually got more and more fed up with it. And now I think that tipping point has been reached where we won't put up with it anymore, and we won't take this rubbish. Just a despicable cretin he is. Anyway, mate, have a good day.
Gaz, thank you very much indeed for your thoughts. People are genuinely angry about this whole report and about what is going to happen next, because it needs to happen, and it needs to happen soon. Morning, Mike, says Darren. Regarding Starling's U-turn on the grooming gang, it's a bit strange that he did the U-turn just before the report came out. Could it be because he had the report 10 days before it was discussed in the Houses of Parliament? Well, exactly right. He had it for a long time. And I think he said he read the report. So why did it take him so long to say that he was going to have a national inquiry after he was so sure he didn't want one just a few months before? Incredible stuff. We'll take some of your calls coming next.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is completely welcome, the proposal to have an inquiry. I've been calling for it for some time. And you might be aware, Ian, the Alexis J inquiry that you referred to there is one that I campaigned for when I was an MP. Yeah. I was one of a handful of MPs who really held the Home Secretary, Theresa May, at the time to account in terms of getting that established.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham. It's coming up to very nearly 5 minutes to 10. And, of course, Julie Hartley-Brewer will be here shortly before that to tell us what's coming up. Helena says this is the inquiry report in 3 years, just in time to seriously influence the general election. Labour must be quaking in their boots. Another reason Captain U-Turn has now okayed an inquiry into this disgusting rape gangs, Mike, is that he fears civil unrest that has been brewing lately would happen, as it happened in Northern Ireland, says Tony in Sussex. They wouldn't be able to imprison everyone. Great show, as usual. In fact, it's getting better than ever. Well, thank you, Tony. It's very kind. Now, earlier on in the show, we took quite a remarkable voice message from somebody called Andrew. This is what he said.
Andrew from Perthshire. You're talking about driving lessons for migrants. I'm a flight instructor, and I know at least 3 migrants who are taking flying lessons.
Taking flying lessons? Illegal migrants? Doesn't sound right, does it? Here's one from Dave, who wants to respond.
Hi, Mike. They're going to want to learn to fly so they can open new illegal routes into this country. They just want to fly over, pick up some more illegals, and then fly back again. Don't overthink it. Thank you.
I mean, that wouldn't be the most surprising thing to happen, would it? I mean, there are other slightly more concerning things they could do once they've learned how to fly. You might remember the people who ended up taking part in the 9/11 terrorist attack used to go to Florida to get flying lessons, but they only wanted to learn how to fly, how to take off and fly. They didn't care about learning how to land, strangely enough. Nobody thought that was odd. They should have done. Martin's in Hampshire. Hello, Martin.
Hi, good morning, Mike.
Morning, sir.
Love all the topics on the show, so become addicted lately myself.
Good man.
To you guys.
Good man. I'm sorry, we have some good news. I haven't got much today, but what do you want to talk to us about?
Well, my thing is, if I was paying for a service, we're supposed to be stopping, the French are supposed to be stopping the legal immigrants coming over on these dinghies.
Yes.
Then, if I was paying for a service that wasn't actually getting the service, then I'd stop paying for it.
Right.
I'd rather that money have gone to, I'm sure someone like Ant Middleton would be able to recruit quite easily some very experienced guys within the sea that could stop these boats, and then we should be making it illegal for them to do this, and then that we can then, disrupt those boats and destroy them. Just to stop them coming over.
Well, you'd think, wouldn't you? As Peter Blexley said, this is now a national emergency. If we now have evidence that people coming here illegally are taking part in the mass raping of young women and children, possibly, as reported in this Baroness's report, then it's even more imperative that we stop them now, isn't it?
Yeah, when they say we can't stop them sort of like in the sea, let's stop the boats. We don't need to worry about them. Let's destroy those boats, or as soon as they go out, we have a team specialised that literally are trained to do that. I'm sure the recruitment would be easy enough.
You would think, yeah, absolutely right. Good call, Dave. Thank you very much. Martin, in Hampshire. Thank you very much indeed. That's it for us, I'm afraid, today. Julie Hartley-Brewers here. Very good morning.
Very good morning.
So...
Yeah, I mean, can I just say, Grooming Gang report, is there anything in that you and I didn't already know, and that anyone who's been paying any attention, including you'd think the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister didn't already know? Not a thing. But a few months ago, if you wanted there to be a public national inquiry, you were basically jumping on a far-right bandwagon and a dog whistle racist. Oh, now... No, you're not. Now it's fine. There is nothing new in that report. It's hard-hitting, it's brilliant. I would not trust Liz Casey not to do anything else than that. But there's nothing new, and everything's suddenly changed. What's changed? That's what I want to know. I'm going to talk to Maggie Oliver about that and the victim.
Absolutely right. And of course, why has Keir Starmer said nothing about it? He was tweeting about dodgy roads yesterday.
He's busy being very important on the world stage.
Yeah, but he's also found time to tweet about dodgy roads.
Yeah.
But he hasn't found time to tweet about a commissioned report that was commissioned by him.
No, I know.
It's unbelievable, isn't it?
I know. But
shocking.
That's what I mean. Again, I have to say, I thought the Tories didn't cover themselves in glory. I mean, I'm sorry, you guys haven't got a leg to stand on.
They haven't. That's the problem. 14 years of whatever they did.
It's all been out there since 2010.
I know.
Come on.
I know. Shocking.
It's just unbelievable, though, isn't it? It still blows my mind that anyone would cover this stuff up.
You can't imagine. Also, the question I've been asking, which I can't get anybody to answer in politics, is who would think that by rooting out ghastly, vile, evil criminals